Chapter 1044. Gidia had the humanoid cannon, and with its origin, power, it could destroy any world in between with a single shot. Not only that, but it also had Chaldea as a hostage. If Wuming fought with Gidia for real, Wuming would definitely have some reservations. Therefore, Wuming returned to the origin and prepared to explore the secret of the origin dragon's adulthood. Only by reaching that height would Wuming be able to effortlessly deal with Gidia, save Chaldea, and protect the various worlds. At that time, Wuming might also find a way to restore the worlds destroyed by Gidia's humanoid cannon. But how would Wuming find out the secret of adulthood? As mentioned before, it would take time since he had no clue. But now, Wuming had a clue, which was why he escaped and returned to the origin. Gidia was injured by the black origin mud and obtained origin power from it. Wuming looked at Enkidu and suddenly said, "So, I want to give it a try." As soon as he said that, Enkidu was shocked and his expression changed. Lord Wuming. Enkidu had been by Wuming's side for a long time, so he basically knew all of Wuming's secrets. There was not much that he did not know. Therefore, Enkidu knew very well how harmful the black origin mud was to Wuming. Most importantly, almost all of the black origin mud that wandered between worlds had been used by Gidia as bombs. There were so many of them that their power was unimaginable. Otherwise, Wuming would not have chosen to leave his body and transfer his consciousness to the backup machine. Since the black origin mud between worlds had been summoned by Gidia and caused an explosion, there was no more black origin mud between worlds. Only some worlds still had black origin mud. After wandering around for a long time, the origin black mud accidentally entered these worlds. Wuming had encountered black origin soil in quite a few worlds. The main body of Erica that Darius used was Pandora's box, which contained the origin black soil. When Wuming was fighting against the last king, Roman, in the Godslayer world, he had accidentally shattered the world barrier. If he had not stopped in time, the origin black soil surrounding the Godslayer world might have entered the Godslayer world. The black origin soil also existed in the Star Cup, and it had even given the Star Cup its own consciousness. The origin black mud had once existed in the root of the origin, and had almost stolen Wuming's home after Wuming's return. Although the origin black mud in the box court world was brought in by Wuming, it had also affected that world, and Az-Dakaha had changed a lot because of it. In the Mesopotamia singularity, Tiamat had also fused with the origin black mud for some reason. Her authority, the Sea of Life, had also fused with the origin black mud, and Tiamat had also become extremely strange and powerful. However, after all that had been said, one thing was very clear, and that was that the origin black mud had all been eliminated. There was very little black origin mud in Pandora's box, and after being sealed for so many years, it had weakened. After fusing with Wuming, it had luckily been eliminated by the immature Wuming. The origin black mud that had almost entered the Godslayer world must have been eliminated in the explosion caused by Gidia. The origin black mud in the Star Cup had fused with the Star Cup's consciousness, and was finally eliminated by Wuming. The origin black mud in the Big Origin had also been eliminated by Wuming using the power of the Big Origin. In the box court world, the origin black mud had entered Az-Dakaha's body, and was eliminated by Wuming in the end. Even Az-Dakaha's soul had perished, and his body had been transformed into an absolute evil spirit base by Wuming. As for Tiamat, Wuming had also used the Void Star Taisui seal on Az-Dakaha's body to bring her to the Big Origin to be purified. In the end, Wuming even had a mother. In any case, all of this meant that the origin black mud that Wuming had encountered or known about had all been eliminated, and not a trace was left. There was no origin black mud between worlds. Only in some worlds, there might be some origin black mud mixed in, but Wuming did not have the time to look for it. Therefore, Enkidu's meaning was very clear. Not to mention the secret of using the origin black mud to trigger adulthood, there was not even a shadow of the origin black mud. But in the next second, Wuming took out a ball of origin black mud. The ball of origin black mud, which had shrunk into a ball, appeared in Wuming's hand as if it was afraid. It was as smooth and round as a black jade ball, and those who did not know would have thought it was a precious jade. Lord Wuming, where did you get this? Enkidu looked at Wuming in confusion and surprise. Kallis answered Enkidu. When Master was fighting with Gaia, he took the opportunity to take some. That's right. When Wuming destroyed Gidea's jade throne, Gidea used the origin black mud to attack Wuming when he dodged, and Wuming grabbed a handful at that time. In fact, when Wuming first heard that Gidea obtained his power from the origin black mud, he had planned to get some origin black mud from Gidea for research. After all, who knew if Wuming would destroy Gidea in the end? To be safe, Wuming collected some origin black mud in advance and planned to test it out after killing Gidea. However, who would have thought that Gidea would add the threat of holding Chaldea hostage to the threat of the Anthropocene canon? With no other choice, Wuming, who changed his tactics at the last minute, chose to escape and let his doppelganger deal with Gidea, while Wuming brought the origin black mud back to the origin to try and see if he could obtain the secret of a coming of age. This idea was a little uncertain, but Wuming was uncertain. As an old gambler, Wuming was also gambling. Wuming was not sure if the origin black mud could help Wuming obtain the secret of coming of age, so Wuming gambled on the good side and came back to try. Wuming had also been severely injured by the origin black mud together with Gidea, but Wuming managed to separate his mind from his body in time and went to the backup machine, so he did not know if the origin black mud had any effect on Wuming's growth. However, the reason why Wuming's body grew so quickly was probably not entirely because he stayed in the box garden world for a long time. The passage of time could indeed have an effect on the growth of the origin dragon, but the number of years needed was astronomical. Therefore, it was very likely that the origin black mud did have a promoting effect on Wuming's growth. It was a pity that Wuming had shifted his mind back then and did not experience the secrets brought by the origin black mud, nor did he know the changes the origin black mud had on Wuming's body. Thinking about it carefully, Wuming increasingly felt that the reason he was approaching the level of coming of age so quickly was very likely because he was severely injured by the origin black mud back then. Now, Wuming did not know whether to laugh or cry. If Wuming's mind had not shifted to the backup machine back then, he might have beaten Gidea up by now. However, Wuming didn't regret it. After all, if the events of a certain time in the past were to change, then everything that Wuming experienced in the future would probably be completely different. Wuming cherished all the people and things that he had encountered so far. So, regret. That was impossible. Although the origin black mud was indeed terrifying to Wuming, when he thought about the people and things that he had encountered so far, Wuming suddenly felt that the origin black mud was actually not that scary. Looking at the origin black mud floating in his hand, Wuming immediately made up his mind. Chapter 1045. Suddenly, Wuming pressed the black origin soil against his heart. Thump. Thump. In an instant, Wuming's heart let out a clear sound that spread throughout the entire root. Then, Wuming showed a pained expression. Lord Wuming. Enkidu was so scared that he quickly held Wuming. Lil An, I'm fine. Wuming's pained expression eased a little, and he no longer seemed to be in so much pain. However, this was only because Wuming didn't want Enki to worry. He forced himself to relax his furrowed brows because of the pain. In fact, the pain coming from his heart was too much for Wuming to bear. Why is it so painful? Wuming wailed in his heart. This was not much less painful than when Wuming was blown up by the explosion caused by Gidea detonating the black origin soil. Back then, Wuming had instantly transferred his consciousness out of his body, so he did not suffer much damage. But this time, Wuming could be said to be enduring pain that was comparable to that time. This was double the pain of his soul and body. It could not be helped. The black origin soil had a restraining effect on Wuming, and it was much more painful than a sword piercing his body. Streams of black origin soil flowed from Wuming's heart to the platform like water droplets falling on a red-hot iron plate. The black origin soil that fell on the platform instantly evaporated. This was the manifestation of the black origin soil being eliminated by the root's defense mechanism. As long as the black origin soil left Wuming's body, it would be eliminated by the root's defense mechanism. At this moment, Wuming's hand was still pressed against his heart to prevent more black origin soil from flowing out and being wasted. Wuming had to slowly wait for the black origin soil to completely enter his body. However, the pain was unbearable. Wuming's brows, which he had forced to relax in order to not worry Enkidu, were now tightly knitted again, but the process was rather slow. "Lil N, you and Collis stay away from me." Wuming used his free hand to take off Collis from his head and threw her into Enkidu's hands. Then, he shook off Enkidu's support, turned around, and walked a few steps to put some distance between him and Enkidu. After turning around, his brows furrowed brows instantly, and his facial expression began to distort. It was clear how painful it was. "Lord Wuming, Master." Both Enkidu and Collis even wanted to catch up to Wuming's go. They knew that Wuming didn't want them to worry, and also didn't want them to be affected by the accident that might happen later. That was why Wuming told Enkidu and Collis to stay away from him. However, Enkidu and Collis wouldn't want to stay away from Wuming because of something like this. However, in the next second, a hand landed on Enkidu's shoulder. Enkidu, who was holding Collis's head, was stunned and immediately turned around. It was Tiamat. Tiamat, who was originally sitting in a daze, stood up and walked behind Enkidu. When she saw Enkidu turn around to look at her, Tiamat let go of Enkidu's shoulder, then walked with her slender legs and slowly walked toward Wuming, who had his back facing them. "Child. Son." Tiamat walked behind Wuming and slowly spoke. Although Tiamat still stuttered when she spoke, Tiamat had a beautiful voice. Her voice was extremely beautiful. When Wuming heard it, his furrowed brows relaxed a little. The pain only eased a little, and he didn't feel any change. Therefore, Wuming was still in pain. However, in the next second, the stumbling Wuming clearly felt someone pulling him. In an instant, Wuming fell backward and was embraced by a warm embrace. Tiamat hugged Wuming, who was sitting on the ground, like a mother hugging her child. Wuming, who was leaning back in the embrace, could even clearly feel the elasticity of the two firm balls on his back. But at this moment, Wuming didn't feel anything else in his heart. There was only warmth, as comfortable as being in a mother's embrace. Ever since he could remember, Wuming only had the love of his grandfather. There was no fatherly or motherly love. Even so, Wuming could still feel from Tiamat's embrace that this was indeed a motherly love that Wuming had never felt before. Therefore, Wuming was quite infatuated with this rare motherly love. As a result, Wuming slowly adapted to the pain caused by the black root mud eroding his body from his heart. In other words, Wuming's attention shifted from the pain to the motherly love to ease the pain until he completely ignored the pain. However, Wuming's purpose was not to eliminate the pain, but to try to find the secret of adulthood when the black root mud caused damage to the body. Therefore, we must be awake. Tiamat seemed to really treat Wuming as her own son who needed to be treated wholeheartedly. She even began to help Wuming achieve his goal. Tiamat, who was half kneeling behind Wuming, hugged Wuming tightly. She rested her chin on Wuming's head. Her pink starry eyes were filled with longing and love for Wuming. She opened her small mouth full of sharp teeth and slowly sang a song. This simple song was exactly the same as Tiamat's cry when she was at the Mesopotamian Singularity. However, it was different from the aggressive song from before. This time, the song contained the great love of a mother and was not aggressive at all. Wuming, who heard this song, felt as if he had been fed a hangover soup. Wu-ming, who was still indulging in motherly love, became extremely clear-headed at this moment. He also understood that Tiamat was helping him. First, she used her motherly love to remove the pain caused by the erosion of the black root mud. Then, she used her song to wake Wu-ming up at this moment. In this way, Wu-ming could concentrate on his research and explore his goal. Wu-ming's eyes were clear as he looked at Tiamat's slender arms that reached out from his shoulders and wrapped around his neck. He smiled. It seems that this mother is set on. Tiamat's behavior made Wu-ming's impression of Tiamat rise to the maximum. Previously, Wu-ming was still considering whether to deny Tiamat as his mother, but now it was confirmed. After that, Wu-ming closed his eyes. He had to hurry up and see if he made the right bet. Wu-ming focused his consciousness on his body and saw the inside of his body. The black substance was spreading little by little from his heart to all parts of his body. The black substance was the black root mud that entered Wu-ming's body. Wu-ming's hand that was originally pressed on his heart had already been put down. Because the black root mud knew that once it left his body, it would be eliminated. Therefore, it entered Wu-ming's body through his heart and spread at a speed visible to the naked eye, eroding Wu-ming's body. At this rate, Wu-ming's entire body would be occupied by the black root mud in a few minutes. Once the black root mud completely occupied Wu-ming's body, who knew what would happen? Wu-ming was willing to gamble because he had insurance. He would not put himself in mortal danger in this gamble. In the next second, a large amount of white substance appeared out of thin air in Wu-ming's body and began to fight against the black substance. This white substance was the origin power. Chapter 1046. Any part of Wu-ming's body could produce origin power, which was why it could appear out of thin air inside Wu-ming's body and fight against the black substance that represented the origin black mud. Origin power was Wu-ming's insurance. Wu-ming consciously controlled the birth and death of origin power, constantly mixing it with the origin black mud. The white substance and the black substance were like two countries at war, going back and forth, one taking over one side, the other taking over the other. In the end, the origin black mud and origin power each took over half of Wu-ming's body. It wasn't a case of you taking up the left and me taking up the right, or you taking up the top and me taking up the bottom. Instead, it was a mixture of you and me. At this moment, Wu-ming's body was filled with black and white substances. Black and white were constantly changing, and finally, the origin black mud and origin power were fighting against each other. However, this wasn't enough. The origin black mud wasn't in its home ground, and it was caught off guard by the origin power. All of its thoughts were focused on resisting the origin power. As a result, the corrosion of the origin black mud on Wu-ming's body weakened. He hadn't obtained anything from the corrosion earlier, and now that the corrosion had weakened, wouldn't it be even harder to obtain the secret? And so, Wu-ming came up with an idea. Wu-ming controlled the origin power and consciously guided the origin black mud through his body again and again. In just a few breaths' time, the origin black mud had completely covered Wu-ming's body, leaving nothing behind. However, what Wu-ming imagined didn't happen. Not only that, nothing happened at all. Nothing happened. Wu-ming was at a loss. Could it be that his gamble was wrong? Refusing to believe it, Wu-ming once again controlled the origin black mud to flow through his body, but the result was still fruitless. This is troublesome. Wu-ming felt a bit irritated. Wu-ming's goal was not to find the secret of adulthood and become stronger, but to kill Gidia, protect the world between worlds, and protect Chaldea. However, this method did not seem to achieve the goal of killing Gidia, protecting the various worlds and Chaldea. That was why Wu-ming was frustrated. It seemed that Wu-ming had made a wrong bet this time. In that case, Wu-ming needed to think of other ways to get through this difficult situation. After all, not only did he want to protect the worlds in between from harm, but he also wanted to take back Chaldea from Gidia, and he also had to kill Gidia. The difficulty of combining the three into one was extraordinarily high. Looks like I have to work on that first. No matter what, they had to destroy the launcher of the anthropoid cannon first. This was the most important thing. Only in this way could the worlds in between be safe and sound. Then, he had to deal a heavy blow to Gidia, take back Chaldea from Gidia, and then completely destroy Gidia. This needed to be done in one go, and the difficulty was not ordinary. After all, Wuming did not know how fast the launcher of the man-made cannons, which were the clusters of trees that looked like withered branches, could recover. He also did not know if Gidia's launcher was the only one that could release the man-made cannons. Wuming also did not know where Gidia hid Chaldea. Even more, Wuming did not know if Gidia had any trump cards. In short, this was not an easy task. However, just as Wuming was thinking, he did not notice that the black origin mud was slowly assimilating with the origin power in Wuming's body. The pain that he had adapted to gradually disappeared. Wuming, who was unaware of all this, left Tiamat's embrace and turned to look at Tiamat. Tiamat did not know why Wuming wanted to leave her embrace, but Tiamat did not need to know. She just looked at Wuming silently, her starry eyes filled with motherly love for Wuming. Seeing Tiamat like this, Wuming did not know what to say for a moment. The words of gratitude that he wanted to express were also stuck in his mouth. Tiamat completely treated Wuming as her son, but Wuming was not used to treating Tiamat as his mother. Tiamat helped him just now, so he should naturally thank Tiamat. However, Wuming felt that once he opened his mouth, Tiamat would become unhappy. After all, parents who truly loved their children did not ask for anything in return. Wuming was worried that Tiamat would think that Wuming was treating her as an outsider and feel sad. Anyway, Wuming was quite conflicted now. Looking at Tiamat's pink starry eyes, Wuming finally decided to thank her. However, before Wuming could finish his sentence, Tiamat seemed to have seen through Wuming's intentions. She happily hugged Wuming in her arms and kept muttering, "Child. Child." Tiamat's expression at the moment looked quite happy, and Wuming was currently buried in Tiamat's bosom, which was filled with motherly love, so he could not speak for a while. After exerting a tremendous amount of effort, Wuming finally left Tiamat's embrace. After persuading Tiamat in every possible way, he made Tiamat obediently sit on the side, and then Wuming walked towards Enkidu. "I made the wrong bet. I have to find another way to deal with Gidia." Wuming told Enkidu and Kallis about what he had just experienced. At the same time, Wuming also told the two of them about his plan to remedy the situation. "Master, is it okay for that thing to stay in your body?" Kallis was referring to the black origin soil in Wuming's body. "I can't get rid of it for a while, but with the protection of the origin energy, the black origin soil can't do anything else." After all, it had already penetrated deep into Wuming's body and could not be instantly removed by the origin energy. However, it was not difficult to completely remove it, but it was not something that could be completely removed in a short period of time. After all, with the origin energy, it would not affect Wuming much for a while, and the pain from the black origin soil was almost gone. Therefore, Wuming decided to deal with the black origin soil in his body after he successfully killed Gidia and took back Chaldea. Next, he would need the help of Enkidu and Kallis to deal with Gidia. He would use all the power he could to severely injure Gidia and take back Chaldea from Gidia. "Use my power as you wish, Master Wuming." After Enkidu finished speaking, he turned into a golden chain and wrapped around Wuming's arm, leaving Kallis floating in the air. "Although I don't have the ability to attack directly, I will stay by your side and assist you, Master." Kallis flew directly onto Wuming's head and settled down. Then, Wuming looked at Tiamat, who was sitting obediently not far away. After Tiamat returned his gaze, Wuming also calmed down. Wuming transformed into a huge origin dragon, rushed into the void, and disappeared. Chapter 1047. The world that was formed by a few clones was destroyed by Gidia. This was something that could not be helped. Putting aside the fact that Gidia's humanoid canon had the power to destroy an entire world with the support of his origin energy, the world that Wuming's clones created was just a very simple world. Apart from the storm and the ocean, there was nothing else. There was not even land. Even if Silent's doppelganger tried his best to stop Gaia's anthropoid cannon, even if it was just the aftershocks, after a few rounds, this simple world would not collapse because of the aftershocks. On the other hand, Gidia's time temple was still intact apart from the jade throne that Wuming smashed with his claw. After all, the Temple of Time was King Solomon's second noble artifact. Later on, it was obtained by Gaia. Now, it was tempered, modified, and strengthened by the power of origin. It would be difficult to destroy it completely. At the very least, if Gaia's artificial cannons wanted to destroy the Temple of Time, they would have to hit it at least 3 times. This was enough to prove how powerful the Time Temple was. Gidia, who had returned to the world, flew to the ruins of the Jade Throne and sat on a fragment as if the Jade Throne was not destroyed. Interesting, very interesting. I didn't expect you to be able to create a world. Gidia praised Wuming. No matter how simple a world was, it was still a world. As long as it was completed in the future, it might be possible to form a world that operated on its own. Facing Gidia's praise, Wuming's clones continued to pretend to be his original body. I've studied the inherent barrier. With my own ability, it's not difficult for me to create such a simple world. Wuming's clones were right. Wuming had been studying the inherent barrier since the beginning. The inherent barrier itself was a world that could exist on its own but required mana to maintain. Wuming's clones were originally God's powers. With this knowledge, it was not difficult for Wuming to create a simple world on his own. However, it was Wuming's first time using the inherent barrier to create a world. Compared to Gidia, Wuming was showing off in front of an expert. After all, Gaia's noble phantasm, or rather, the second noble phantasm that originally belonged to Solomon, the time to where the crown has come to inspire all things, as Paulina, which was the Temple of Time, was actually an inherent enchantment. It was a space that gathered and integrated the history of mankind that had been converted into mana. It existed in an imaginary space that was isolated from the usual flow of time. It was originally an inherent barrier, but it later became a singularity. Later on, due to the origin power and Gidia's control of the relic, it became a special small world. If Gidia wanted to, the Time Temple could undoubtedly become a new world. However, Gidia did not want to do that. That was why he kept the Time Temple in its current state, leaving the moon-shaped world and coming to this world. Therefore, in a sense, Wuming was showing off in front of an expert. You're really strong, Gidia. Gidia chose the right battlefield and grasped Wuming's weakness, so Wuming did not dare to fight with all his strength against Gidia. It could be said that he had all the right time, place, and people. Gidia had the artificial cannon that could easily destroy the world, and the battlefield between Wuming and Gidia was still between countless worlds. In addition, Wuming was also threatened by Gidia to some extent, so he could not fight with Gidia at all. If one were to simply compare Wuming and Gidia, Wuming's individual combat ability was very strong, while Gidia's was good at AoE damage. In short, all the factors added together were quite unfavorable to Wuming. However, it was good that Gidia's moves were simple and did not have any strange abilities. Wuming could still deal with it, but if he wanted to defeat Gidia under such conditions, he still had to plan for the long term. In other words, he had to stall for time. Everything Wuming was doing now was to stall for time. Whether it was building the world, chatting with Gidia, or stopping Gidia from releasing the artificial cannon, they were all stalling for time. In order to avoid being too deliberate, Wuming also took the initiative to attack, but those were all harmless attacks that basically did not have any effect on Gidia. However, in the end, he still did not find any good way and could only rely on force to break through. Wu Ming's clone had received the plan of the main body, and the main body was also rushing here. What Wu Ming's clone needed to do was to cover for the next plan and make the best preparations. First, he needed to destroy Gidia's launcher that launched the artificial cannon, the huge sphere made of dead branches. Glancing at the sphere from the corner of his eye, Wu Ming's clone let go of the blade of salvation and let it float in the dragon-shaped phantasm around him. Then, Wu Ming's doppelganger raised a hand and chanted, "For victory, come to me quickly. Immortal Sun, please give me a shining steed. O spirited horse, with the lifeline of my origin dragon, I bestow upon the eternal glory. Bring forth my radiant wheel of light." Wu Ming's clone suddenly emitted light. In this universe-like world, it was like a sun. This was an enhanced version of the spirit that could double the power of the sun incarnation. A star appeared in front of Gidia. The light made Gidia unable to open his eyes for a while, although Wu Ming's clone did not know whether Gidia had eyes or not. The next second, the star rushed to Gidia. What? Gaia stood up from the jade throne fragment in the face of the star that was rushing towards her. She looked surprised. The reason was very simple. Regardless of whether Gidia was threatening him or not, Chaldea was on Gidia's side. If Gidia did not protect Chaldea, Chaldea would definitely be destroyed under the impact of this star. Did the other party not care about Chaldea's safety? Just as Gidia mobilized the demon god pillar and prepared to defend, the huge star suddenly flickered and disappeared. No, it didn't disappear. Gaia could feel that her back was burning hot at the moment. And the star did not disappear, but moved so fast that it teleported. The incarnations on Wu Ming's clone had not been removed. The phoenix incarnation was still there, but the burden on the body was not small. Wu Ming's clone used the sun incarnation. It seemed to be rushing to Gidia, but in fact, it was aiming at the reloaded anthropoid cannon behind Gidia. The star came into contact with the launcher of the anthropoid cannon, and the next second, thunder, hurricane, vortex, and undercurrent full of destruction all exploded in the star. And in this way, the whole star that was originally stable exploded. Chapter 1048. Wu Ming's clone used his various avatars as ammunition to detonate the sun avatar, using it as a bomb to explode behind Gidia. He wanted to destroy the artificial cannon's launcher, which was the cluster of branches. Without a doubt, Wu Ming's clone succeeded. After the violent explosion, the smoke and dust dispersed. Gidia had already been protected by the demon god pillars, preventing him from being affected by the explosion. Although it was an attack aimed at the artificial cannon's launcher, it also contained the power of the source. The aftermath was enough to make Gidia suffer, so he had to be on guard. Because the explosion had ended, only a few demon god pillars remained. The barrier dissipated, and Gidia's figure reappeared. Because it was just too powerful, and with the suppression of the power of the source, the demon god pillars did not have the time to split and grow. Just then, all the demon god pillars stood in front of Gidia, but even so, only a few demon god pillars remained. However, the demon god pillars successfully protected Gidia, not letting Gidia suffer any damage. And as long as there was a demon god pillar, and as long as Gidia existed, the 72 demon god pillars would regenerate. However, the few fragments left behind by the Jade Throne had basically all shattered. As for Wu Ming's clone's target, the artificial cannon's launcher, it had disappeared. In Gidia's senses, the artificial cannon's launcher had been destroyed by Wu Ming in the explosion of the star just now. That's self-destruction, right? The explosion of the star just now was without a doubt self-destruction. Otherwise, how could it be so powerful? If Wu Ming really had such a powerful move, he could have used it right from the start. Why would he waste so much time with Gidia? However, why would he self-destruct? Even Gidia did not expect Wu Ming to choose to self-destruct. After all, no matter who stood in Wu Ming's perspective, no one would do that, right? After all, Gidia's goal was to kill Wu Ming. His self-destruction was what Gidia wanted, but Wu Ming should have aimed at Gidia before self-destructing. Also, was Wu Ming going to die just like that? That was too ridiculous. Even Gidia would not believe it. Then what was going on? Just as Gidia was thinking, a meteor streaked across the cosmos like sky between worlds. The meteor's target was Gidia. When the meteor was still a long distance away from Gaia discovered the meteor's tracks. After all, it was too strange for a meteor to appear at this time. Was this Wu Ming's trump card? However, the star that Wu Ming had just created had indeed self-destructed. Gidia could clearly sense Wu Ming's aura disappearing bit by bit. Is this a unique phenomenon between worlds? Gidia decided to observe for now. However, just as Gidia was thinking, the meteor arrived before Gidia in an instant. It was not a meteor. It was Wu Ming in his huge dragon form. Roar! Wu Ming roared furiously and swiped at Gidia with his claws imbued with the power of origin. Because the demon god pillars had not fully recovered, a few demon god pillars could not block the claw imbued with the power of origin. Rip! Immediately, the demon god pillars were severed and Gidia was sent flying. Wu Ming's figure stopped where Gidia was originally. With a swipe of his claws, he shattered the demon god pillars that had been severed into pieces and disappeared. He had to destroy all of the demon god pillars while there were only a few left. The demon god pillars' recovery speed was suppressed by the power of origin. Now, Gidia did not have a single demon god pillar that he could use. And Gidia was finally injured by Wu Ming. Gaia, who had been sent flying, steadied herself and touched her chest. An extremely exaggerated wound stretched from Gidia's shoulder to his waist. A piercing pain surged into Gidia's head. Before Wu Ming's claws reached Gidia, the remaining demon god pillars protected Gidia, allowing Gidia to avoid Wu Ming's direct attack. As a result, this wound was not caused by Wu Ming's claws, but by the power of origin imbued within Wu Ming's claws, or in other words, by grazing Gidia. Otherwise, Gaia wouldn't only have one wound on her body. A blue figure appeared from the hole in Gidia's chest. It was the crystal ball that stored Chaldea's base. As Gidia touched the wound, the Chaldea's crystal ball fused into Gidia's body again. Clearly, Gidia had hidden Chaldea even deeper in his body. The sharp-eyed Wu Ming obviously saw this. So it was there. Now, all the demon god pillars had been destroyed and the artificial cannon's launcher had been destroyed. Chaldea's location had also been found. Now, as long as he took Chaldea back, Gidia would lose everything he relied on. And Wu Ming had discovered a new move. With a wave of Wu Ming's dragon claw, a dozen meteors flew towards Gidia. At a closer look, those were not meteors at all. They were clearly Wu Ming. Or in other words, they were Wu Ming's clones. And these clones were not as strong as Wu Ming. They were even much weaker than Wu Ming. So, even if there were more of them, Gidia was not afraid. At the same time, he also knew why that Wu Ming had self-destructed so easily. Because that was also a clone. Just like the soundless creatures that were flying towards it. Mere clones. Gidia clasped his hands together and opened them again. Countless origin black mud spurted out from Gidia's palms like lasers. In an instant, a few Wu Ming's clones were hit. However, there were also clones that survived. These clones took the opportunity to approach Gidia. Immediately, the surroundings emitted a star-like light. Could it be? Gidia realized something. In the next second, several stars surrounded Gidia and exploded. This was Wu Ming's new move. Using the clones as bombs, he used the Sun incarnation with all his strength. With the power of self-destruction, he attacked Gidia. Such a disgusting move was simply Wu Ming's signature move. It was a pity that Wu Ming had not discovered this point before. Art was explosions. Sure enough, each of the 12 clones was useful. It was just a matter of whether they knew how to use it or not. After the explosion, Gidia flew out from the smoke that had not yet dissipated. His face was full of anger. Perhaps he was disgusted by Wu Ming's move. "Aren't you afraid of hurting Chaldea?" Gidia was right. The explosion of Wu Ming's clones was not that powerful, but it was not small either. It was almost comparable to the gas explosion in Winterwood City. Even if Chaldea was in Gidia's body, if he really destroyed Chaldea, it would not be a joke. However, Wu Ming smiled at Gidia. The explosion caused by self-destruction is almost all the power of the source. How could it hurt Chaldea? That's right. Whether it was the Sun incarnation or the other clones, or Wu Ming's Sun incarnation, they were all driven by the purest power of the source. From a human's point of view, these explosions were very ordinary. They could not hurt Chaldea's defense at all. But for Gidia, who had the black soil, it would definitely cause double the damage. When Wu Ming slapped Gidia away with his claw, he clearly saw that Gidia was injured, while Chaldea's crystal ball was fine. Obviously, as long as he attacked with pure source power, he would not hurt Chaldea. Reducing the power of the explosion and increasing the concentration of source power would not affect Chaldea much. This was the effective method Wu Ming accidentally found to deal with Gidia. Chapter 1049. You deserve to be called my enemy. Gidia was not angry that Wu Ming had found such a shameless way. Instead, he praised him. "So, you should just accept your death, Gidia." Wu Ming's body was glowing. Its gigantic dragon body instantly disintegrated and turned into countless clones of Wu Ming. Each of the clones knew how to use the Sun and charged towards Gidia. I think you're mistaken about something." In response, Gaia snorted with a smile. "Even if my third relic doesn't have a launcher, it can still be activated." Gidia's muscles tensed up and a large amount of energy gathered in the muzzle-like gap on its chest. "The time of birth has come. I'll use this to correct nature." Gidia crossed his arms and suddenly opened them. "Our Salmadol Salamones." Boom! Countless rays of light appeared from Gidia's chest and gathered into purple energy rays. Each ray of light was comparable to the heat of the star Holy Sword. The energy rays that were gathered by countless rays of light were full of deterrence. The imaginary number 1 relic created by Gaia, Ars Nova, would collect the energy obtained from burning human history and convert it into an attack before launching it out. This attack was the creation of Gaia's third noble artifact. It was used to correct all things, Ars Almadel Salamones, which was also known as the humanistic canon. The so-called launcher was just a dispensable tool. To Gaia, even if it did not have a launcher, as a relic that it had mastered, it could still retract and release it as it pleased. The third relic penetrated countless clones of Wu Ming and blasted into the distance. Once again, there was a big explosion in the world. Wu Ming did not expect Gidia's humanoid cannon to be able to fire without a launcher. After all, he did not expect Gidia to be able to turn the energy from burning human history into a relic. He could only say that he did not know enough about it. Thanks to Wu Ming's carelessness, many more worlds were destroyed by this attack. Ha 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 ha. Dragon of Origin, you are too naive. Gaia laughed delightedly. It did not expose that the humanoid cannon was Gidia's relic. This was one of the trump cards that Gidia had left behind. Looking at the clones of Wu Ming disappearing into the flood of relic, Gidia once again gathered energy in its chest and was ready to fire again to kill Wu Ming. Silent Ming dispelled the dragon body and created a clone. He wanted to take the opportunity to pretend to be a clone and get close to Gaia to rescue Chaldea. Gaia had already guessed it. Although Gaia couldn't tell which one was the main body, she could just destroy all of the clones, and that would be enough. Die, Ars Almadel Salamones, the time of birth has come, thus correcting all things. However, just as Gideon was about to release the second relic, tens of weapons flew toward Gideon out of thin air. It seemed like they were long-range attacks. Gideon did not think that those things could hurt him, so he did not care about those weapons at all. In fact, the weapons hit Gideon, but they did not have any effect at all. They could not even break through Gideon's defense. There was not even a spark. However, in the next second, a transparent spherical light film with a diameter of more than 10 meters enveloped Gideon. What's this? Gideon recognized the spherical light that enveloped him. It was Wu Ming's defensive skill. It seemed to be a relic. Wu Ming had used this skill to block Gideon's attack in the beginning. Gideon had witnessed the defensive power of this thing. If Gideon were to release his own relic, he might not be able to break through the spherical light film. However, if Gideon were to give up on releasing his relic, he would obviously fall into Wu Ming's trap. Therefore, Gideon maintained his relic until he was about to release it. Since there was no blind spot in the defensive light film, Wu Ming would definitely make a move when he entered. It would not be too late to release it then. When? Later on, Gideon began to think. Could it be those weapons just now? Gideon had some guesses. This was a relic with a physical form. Moreover, it was very likely that it had mixed in with the dozens of weapons just now and approached Gideon together. That was why Gideon was enveloped by the light film. In reality, Gideon had guessed correctly. Wu Ming used the Manchala formation to release a large number of weapons and hid his paradox armor among them. Wu Ming believed that Gideon would not stop releasing his relic because of a few weapons that were not enough to deter him. As expected, Gideon was hit because of this. Suddenly, the 9 rings on Gideon's fingers flashed. The 9 rings left behind by King Solomon were not just for show. Even if they were almost useless against Wu Ming, they could provide Gideon with part of his wisdom. Gideon began to think again. There was no need for Wu Ming to get close to Gideon to take back Chaldea. Wu Ming could totally attack Gideon first. After all, Wu Ming knew that he could use pure origin power to hurt Gideon without affecting Chaldea. In the next second, a gap appeared in the spherical light film that enveloped Gideon. An extremely large flood surged into the spherical light film. The flood contained a large amount of pure origin power and could cause great harm to Gideon. However, the flood would cause very little harm to Chaldea. It could be said that it was killing 2 birds with 1 stone. Seeing this, Gideon was even more certain that he had understood Wu Ming's intention. At that moment, the relic that he had gathered earlier was instantly launched toward the gap. Hundreds of millions of rays of light that were comparable to the star creation Holy Sword instantly blocked the gap that appeared in the spherical light film. Before the flood that entered through the gap could splash onto Gideon, the gap was blocked. Now, Gideon thought that he had more or less understood Wu Ming's moves. If it was the same move again, Gideon was confident that he would not fall for it. Just as Gideon was thinking that, there was a fluctuation in front of Gideon. Wu Ming appeared out of nowhere and slashed Gideon with the divine blade of salvation. Swoosh, bang, at the same time, the spherical light film that surrounded Gideon shattered, and Gideon was sent flying again. It was exactly the same as the previous scene. However, this time, Wu Ming had an additional item in his hand. The Chaldea crystal ball was in Wu Ming's hand when he slashed Gideon. It's all thanks to you, Kalas. Wu Ming praised Kalas. It's my duty and honor, master. Kalas answered respectfully. Wu Ming's goal from the beginning was never to attack Gideon, but to take back Chaldea. Wu Ming had indeed hidden in his clone for Gideon to see, letting Gideon know that Wu Ming's goal was Chaldea. After that, the armor of paradox and the flood mixed with the source of power were just a feint to make Gidia think that Wuming's goal was Gidia. Taking advantage of Gidia releasing its noble artifact and thinking that it had seen through Wuming's scheme, Wuming used all his strength to drive the Phoenix incarnation to expand the gap and instantly appeared in front of Gidia, and finally succeeded in snatching Chaldea from Gidia's hands. The reason why Wuming praised Callis was entirely because, whether it was the timing of Gidia's relaxation or the subtle operation of the gap in the light film, it was all done by Callis. In short, Callis deserved Wuming's praise. Ignoring Gidia, Wuming took the lead to check Chaldea. After all, Chaldea had fallen into Gidia's hands, who knew if Gidia had done anything to Chaldea. However, just as Wuming was investigating the inside of the crystal ball, a demon god pillar suddenly emerged from the crystal ball, completely eating Wuming. Chapter 1050. The demon god pillar came so suddenly that Wuming did not even have time to react before he was completely engulfed by the demon god pillar. At this time, Gidia, who stabilized himself after flying backwards, laughed loudly. Ha 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 ha. You didn't expect it, did you? Dragon of Origin. I have already released Floro's seal. I have been waiting for you to take back Chaldea. That's right, as early as when Gidia took back Chaldea, Gidia had already released Floros from the Holy Grail. The wisdom provided by King Solomon's 9 rings to Gidia was not that simple. Gidia's plan was inseparable from that wisdom. After Floros broke free from the seal, it had been lurking in Chaldea, transforming into Leviticus. While chatting with the people in Chaldea and persuading them to surrender, it was silently waiting for the right time. And this time was the moment when Wuming took back Chaldea. Therefore, the reason why Wuming was able to take back Chaldea was also part of Gidia's plan. In order to not let you see any clues, I spent a lot of effort to let you successfully take back Chaldea. Now, enjoy the feast of the Black Origin Mud that I left for you. The Black Origin Mud was Wuming's natural enemy, but to completely kill him, the first way was to use the Black Origin Mud to continuously attack Wuming. The second way was to use more Black Origin Mud than Wuming could bear to swallow Wuming in one fell swoop. This was like insecticide and mosquitoes. Spraying insecticide at mosquitoes, because of the air flow and other external factors, mosquitoes would not die instantly. Therefore, it was necessary to continuously spray insecticide at mosquitoes to achieve the goal of killing them. However, if the mosquitoes were directly soaked in the insecticide, even if they were not poisoned to death, they would drown. It was simple and crude. The first move was obviously unreliable against Wuming. After all, Wuming wasn't weak, so there was no way he could use the Black Origin soil to continuously attack Wuming. As such, he had no choice but to use the second move. Therefore, Gidia planned this conspiracy and gave almost all of the Origin Black soil to Floros for safekeeping. He only kept a little for himself to use as a means of attack. Gidia was prepared to use the Black Origin Mud to devour Wuming and kill him. And now, their scheme had succeeded. What a pity, Origin Dragon. I still can't forget the pain you gave me. I have to thank you properly. There was clearly something wrong with the demon god pillar Flawless's voice. It was meaningless. Flawless's brain must have become abnormal in the seal of endless darkness. One should know that Flawless was sealed by one of the 12 incarnations, the warrior incarnation, with the golden sword. That was the golden sword that separated Flawless from the concept of the 72 demon god pillars. The seal on the golden sword was a seal that transcended time and space. Who knew how long Flawless had stayed in the seal for? Although I can't punish you personally, letting you drown in the Black Origin soil is the biggest punishment for you. Ha 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 ha. To Wuming, the Black Origin soil could be said to be the poison of all poisons. Letting Wuming drown in the Black Origin soil, Wuming would undoubtedly suffer intense pain in both his body and soul before he died. There was indeed no punishment more severe than this. The demon god pillar Flawless kept squirming. A trace of the black origin soil leaked out from Flawless's body. From the very beginning, after swallowing Wooming, Flawless began to squirm. That was the black origin soil that existed in Flawless's body rioting. It was like a stone that was thrown into a lake. After Wooming was swallowed by the demon god pillar, Wooming's consciousness became blurry. The words of Gidia and Flawless were also intermittently transmitted into Wooming's mind. It couldn't be helped. This time, Flawless and Gidia really put in a lot of effort. The amount of black origin soil that Flawless preserved could be said to be beyond Wooming's imagination. Once Wooming was swallowed, he couldn't maintain his consciousness. After all, the amount of black origin soil was just too much. Wooming was suffering extreme pain in his soul and body all the time. His blurry consciousness was also caused by this pain. I've underestimated Gaia. Wooming's mind was in a disjointed state. Master, you can do what you did last time and transfer your consciousness to the backup machine again. This way, you can avoid the black origin soil's damage to your soul. Collis instantly calculated the answer. What about you guys? Wooming forced himself to be alert and talked to Collis and Enkidu. We can help you protect your body. Enkidu answered. Don't even think about it. Wooming interrupted Enkidu without hesitation. If that was the case, Wooming's consciousness and soul could be preserved. However, this body would be finished. This body that had lost its mental resistance would definitely be completely consumed by the black origin soil. Even if Enkidu and Collis stayed behind to protect Wooming's body, they would definitely not be able to block it as easily as last time when Wooming's body fell into the box world. In other words, Enkidu and Collis would definitely die with Wooming's body. Only Wooming would be left alive. I promised you guys that I would never abandon you guys and escape alone. Master, shut up. Master Wooming, I refuse. Collis and Enkidu shut their mouths. After all, they knew how stubborn Wooming was. When it came to matters like this, once Wooming had made up his mind, he would definitely not change it unless there was a chance for a change. But now, a chance for a change was really hard to come by. Talking to Collis and Enkidu had strengthened Wooming's consciousness quite a bit. In other words, he could still hold on for now. There was no such thing as a dead end. If there was a dead end, then it was definitely because the person involved had not found a way out. Wooming decided to find a way out before his consciousness completely disappeared. Immediately, Wooming checked his abilities. Because of the black origin soil's continuous corrosion, I can't use them at all. Whether it was the 12 incarnations, magic, or magic, he could not use them at all. In the instant that Wooming gathered his energy to use them, the black origin soil would corrode the energy that Wooming gathered. Hence, he could not use them at all. Some of the gadgets and items that Wooming kept in his Dragonist dimension could not be used in the current situation. Naturally, the physical relics and weapons could not be used. They were all hidden in the divine blade of salvation that was one with Wooming. Meanwhile, Wooming's divine blade of salvation was already curled up in Wooming's body, not daring to come out at all. Even the armor of paradox that was created by Artoria to create a time paradox seemed to have lost its motivation to live and was waiting for death. As expected, there was too much black origin soil. Because Wooming used all of these things, almost all of them had a trace of origin power. In the face of so much black origin soil, there was no doubt that they were restrained. Naturally, it was reasonable for them to be afraid. As of now, Wooming really could not find a way to solve the current crisis. However, at this moment, Wooming suddenly felt that the black origin soil's corrosion on him seemed to have weakened. That was because Wooming's pain suddenly decreased a lot, and it was still weakening. Wooming's consciousness also slowly dissipated and became completely awake. The black origin soil was gradually accepting Wooming, or rather, Wooming was gradually adapting to the black origin soil. This is Wuming discovered that the source of all this phenomenon was a small part of the black origin soil that existed in his body. Chapter 1051. For some reason, the black mud that Wuming had left in his body had fused with the source power in Wuming's body. Because the fusion was slow and Wuming was focused on fighting Gidia, he did not notice this. However, most importantly, the black mud that had fused with the source power did not pose a threat to Wuming. On the contrary, the fused energy even helped Wuming get through his current predicament. The black mud was still rioting, but it did not harm Wuming anymore. Instead, it even replenished Wuming's energy. Although it was slow, this was the truth. So it's only starting now. Wuming finally understood that this was the result of Wuming's previous attempt to use the black origin mud to summon power. At that time, it was probably because there was too little black origin mud. Now, Wuming was directly soaking in the black origin mud. In addition, the black origin mud in Wuming's body, which had fused with the power of origin, had a stimulating effect. With these two factors working together, it successfully caused a phenomenon that Wuming had never seen before. This power seems to be the source power. Wuming sensed the power after the black mud fused with the source power and found that this power seemed to be the source power. It is indeed the source power, but it's different from my source power. After the fusion, Wuming felt that the new power was the source power, and it was almost the same as before. However, if one had to compare it to the source power of the past, then the source power of the past was still underage, while the source power of the current source power could be considered adult. Could this be the secret of adulthood? No, it was definitely not that simple. After all, apart from the source power of the adult version in Wuming's body, there were no other changes. Could it be because there wasn't enough of it? After all, this had happened before, so Wuming's guess was not wrong. Wuming let go of his body and mind. He closed his eyes and allowed the black mud to enter his body. Under the guidance of the new power, it continuously produced new source power. Afterwards, he used this source power to cleanse his body again and again. Wuming's goal was very simple. Since the source power was adult and Wuming's body was underage, would using the adult source power to cleanse Wuming's underage body be able to allow Wuming to transform? That was what Wuming guessed. No matter what, he had to give it a try. However, most of the time, the truth was just that simple. After being continuously baptized by origin power, Wuming's body had indeed changed slightly. Wuming opened his eyes and sensed his body. No matter how he looked at it, nothing had changed, but Wuming could feel in his heart that the current him and the him a few minutes ago were on two completely different levels. Is this the power of the great origin? Wuming's pupils had turned golden, and the center of his pupils was still red, but it was no longer wine red. Instead, it was a fiery red that was full of vitality. At this moment, Wuming felt as if he had just woken up from a dream. Many things seemed to automatically appear in Wuming's mind. It was about the origin dragon, the origin black soil, and the great origin. If the type moon world's origin was the origin of everything that gave birth to the type moon world, then the great origin was the origin of all the worlds that gave birth to it. Regardless of whether it was the world that Wuming had first stayed in, the type moon world, or the other worlds that Wuming had experienced, they were all born from the great origin. They took root and sprouted between the worlds, becoming powerful worlds that gave birth to life and flourished. The origin dragon was actually a guardian deity that protected and complemented the great origin. At the same time, it was also a guardian deity that protected the worlds that were born from the great origin. This was why the two great restraints of the type moon world had so generously allowed Wuming to cheat, open a backdoor, and even form a contract with him. It was because the two great restraints knew about Wuming's identity. If Wuming was in the two great restraints' shoes, he would have done the same thing. Although it was a cliché, the origin dragon was truly an existence that protected the stable development of each world. It was responsible for resolving the apocalyptic crisis of each world, and it had unparalleled power that could easily resolve a world's crisis. Although the Type Moon world had given birth to parallel worlds and used this method to escape the apocalypse, it wouldn't be a loss to curry favor with Wuming, so it had done so. As for worlds without parallel worlds, the origin dragon wouldn't take action when species changed or went extinct, because the world wouldn't be destroyed as a result, and new species would be born. It was only when an irreversible apocalyptic crisis occurred that the origin dragon would either appear with a certain identity to save the world, or it would directly take action. In short, the apocalyptic crisis of the world would always be resolved. To put it simply, the origin dragon was a so-called god to each world. From a certain perspective, it could be considered a god in the truest sense. After all, the origin dragon and the great origin dragon complemented each other. It represented the great origin, and the great origin represented it. However, even if it was the origin of all worlds, even if it was the great origin that transcended all existences, there would still be death. Existence was the embodiment of a life, and this existence would definitely experience death. However, the great origin's death wasn't the usual way of death. The great origin's death was to enter a deep slumber, after which it would restart after a certain period of time. If there was a word to describe this, it would be reincarnation. After a reincarnation was complete, the great origin would continue to give birth to new worlds, while the origin dragon would continue to carry out its duties and protect the world. By the way, the origin dragon that complemented the great origin would also die, as a result, and it would recover its strength as the great origin restarted. As for Wuming, what he experienced was the process of the origin dragon restarting after its death. In any case, even if Wuming didn't work hard, he would still recover his strength after a certain period of time. Therefore, the origin dragons weren't a single species. Since ancient times, there had only been one origin dragon living in the great origin, and that was the current Wuming. This explained why Wuming hadn't seen a single origin dragon when he first came to the great origin. The origin dragon's aura that Wuming sensed back then was also left behind by him. After all, this was his home. In that case, the origin dragon that White Yiksha saw might very well be my past self. At that time, Wuming might very well have been on his way to resolve an apocalyptic crisis in a certain world, and White Yiksha saw him along the way. Although he knew the truth, Wuming was still worried. There was only one origin dragon in existence. What if something happened to the origin dragon while it was still in hibernation? What would they do? Could it be that the root of origin would create another one? In that case, the origin dragon in the past might not have been Wuming. Wuming was destined to not get an answer at the moment. Also, what was up with the black origin mud, the natural enemy of the origin dragons? Moreover, the black origin mud was currently fusing with the origin power in Wuming's body, stimulating Wuming's growth and giving Wuming new strength. Was this a natural enemy or a boost? Unfortunately, that was all the information that appeared in Wuming's mind. It was probably because Wuming hadn't fully matured yet. Either that, or he would only know the rest after returning to the great origin. Call us, and Wuming called out. Master. Lord Wuming. A golden heaven lock vaguely appeared on Wuming's arm, while the crown on Wuming's head glowed. The two were responding to Wuming. Although they didn't know what had happened, they knew that Wuming had survived the danger. That was all they needed to know. It's time to go out and end this. Chapter 1052. In the outside world, Gidia, who had rested for a while, sat down on a random spot in the Time God's palace. Gidia had paid a price for creating a situation where he could kill Wuming completely. He had been injured by Wuming several times. After all, he had put on a good show. But fortunately, the plan had succeeded. When Gidia thought about how he could get rid of all future troubles, the pain on his body did not hurt as much. Next, we'll reach the root and achieve our great cause. Although Gideon was Wuming's enemy, his thoughts were also based on the great cause. That was why Gideon did not think that he had done anything wrong. At this moment, he only felt slightly emotional and perplexed because the great cause was about to be achieved. He was emotional that after thousands of years of hard work, he had finally achieved his goal. He was perplexed about what he should do next after achieving his goal. When anyone's final goal was about to be achieved, if he did not die, he would definitely feel perplexed about the future. Moreover, Gideon was someone who had no friends, relatives, family, or hobbies. He only had the ultimate goal of saving the world through the burning of human principles. I missed the king a little. Gideon used the burning of human principles after all. It was just a magic technique. Although he called himself the demon god king, he did not have many subordinates under him. Although the 72 demon god pillars were Gideon's subordinates in name and treated Gideon as their king, Gideon was an amalgamation of the 72 demon god pillars' consciousnesses. When Gideon spoke to different people, he would show different personalities. This was also because Gideon was an amalgamation of the 72 demon god pillars' consciousnesses. Gideon could be said to be a loner. It could only be said that Gideon's relationship with the 72 demon god pillars was rather strange. Gideon was one of the 72 demon god pillars, but not the 72 demon god pillars. Gideon was an individual, but also a whole like the 72 demon god pillars. As a result, once Gideon died, the 72 demon god pillars as a whole would collapse and cease to exist. But as long as Gideon was still alive, even if the 72 demon god pillars all died at once, with Gideon's current strength, he would be able to summon them back. At the same time, Gideon was an amalgamation of the consciousness of the 72 demon god pillars. This meant that the demon god pillars were actually a kind of technique. The 72 demon god pillars were the same as Gideon's, both of them burning the principles of humanity. As tactics, once they achieved the goal they had set a long time ago, they would definitely fall into emptiness. This was because they were the ones being used, not the ones dominating. Even if they won, it would not change the fact that they were tactics. That was why Gideon said, "I missed the king." As for the king that Gideon mentioned, it was naturally King Solomon. If that's the case, why don't you go and see him yourself? Hearing this, Gideon was shocked. The demon god pillar Floros also shook violently. However, Floros was not shocked. It was because Wuming was cutting open its stomach. Poochie, after the sound, a hole suddenly appeared on the huge demon god pillar. It was opened from the inside. The demon god pillar, Floros, was like a deflated balloon or a frosted eggplant. The entire demon god pillar shrank because of this hole, and withered. And from the hole that suddenly appeared on the demon god pillar Floros, a stream of light instantly flew out. It floated in the sky and revealed a figure. It was Wuming. "You're actually still alive." Gideon was in disbelief. This feeling was like, you clearly soaked a mosquito in insecticide, but after a while, the mosquito reappeared in front of you alive and kicking. It even changed from a centimeter in size into a monster. Who wouldn't be shocked? And after being shocked, Gideon became angry. The existence that you thought you could kill didn't die, but was still alive and kicking. Who wouldn't be angry? As for Floros, it was already too busy to care about itself. It didn't have time to be angry or shocked. Floros was like a fish out of water. Its whole body struggled in pain. Then, after struggling a few times, it stopped moving. In the next second, Floros melted and turned into a pool of black matter floating in the air. Wuming waved his hand and attracted the black matter. It integrated into his body, and a lot of new origin power was generated. That's right, the black matter after Floros melted was the origin black mud. Wuming used it and absorbed it into his body. You actually assimilated with the origin black mud. Did you reverse it? No matter how stupid Gidia was, he could see that this was Wuming's trick. At this moment, in Gidia's understanding, Wuming was now in a reverse state, which was quite popular among the servants. The so-called altar. Wuming's pupils were now golden, and his pupils were fiery red, which was probably the characteristic of his altar. Otherwise, how could he turn fluoros into the origin black mud and absorb it? One must know that the origin black mud was like poison to Wuming. I just happened to get a new power. For Gidia's guess, Wuming did not give a positive answer. Although it was not a secret, Wuming also knew that his change was not something worth telling the enemy. However, Wuming's ambiguous words, in Gidia's ears, was admitting that Wuming had been altered. Come and try my new power, Gidia. Wuming shouted and waved his hand. Countless origin black mud-like monstrous waves appeared out of thin air behind Wuming, raised high, and rushed toward Gidia. This posture was bound to cover Gidia in an instant. Now, Gidia also realized that he may no longer be Wuming's opponent, but even so, Gidia would not give up. My great cause, my ideals, the meaning of my birth, will never end with being destroyed by you. Gidia seemed to be going all out, his body trembled violently, and then began to burn. This was Gaia, the burning of human principles style, using all the power of the burning of human principles. My name is Gidia. Humanity burning humanity. Demonic King Gidia. Gidia's muscles were tight, as if all of his energy was about to explode. Then, Gidia hugged his chest and clenched his fists. The muzzle-like thing on Gidia's chest began to gather purple energy that was so red that it was black. Gaia had gathered so much energy that her entire body was cracking. She suddenly spread out her arms, and the purple energy that had gathered in front of her chest, which was so purple that it was turning black and red, suddenly shot out. Third relic, activate. The time of birth has come, use this to correct everything, this is my everything. Ars. Almadel. Salomonis. Gidia's relic was released at a scale that had never been seen before on Wuming. Gidia's body was cracking at an accelerated speed. Such an enormous amount of energy was not something that Gidia could release in one go. Perhaps, even if Gidia won, it would be overloaded and cause its body to collapse. Gidia was going for broke. This was a battle where there was no victory, and it was a battle where one's life was at stake. This was Gidia's farewell, and at the same time, it was Gidia's unwillingness. All of this ended as the unimaginable giant pillar of black-red aurora collided with the black mud that was like a monstrous wave. There was no explosion as expected. There was only a white light that was produced when the two collided. The white light seemed to have covered the entire world in an instant. Time seemed to have stopped at this moment. However, the most important thing was that everything had ended. Chapter 1053. An unknown amount of time had passed. Inside the Root of Origin, on the central platform, Wuming, who had transformed into his human form, was squatting on the giant dragon head of his backup machine. He placed one hand on the machine as if he was inspecting it. Magic circles appeared around Wuming's backup machine. Not long after, the magic circles disappeared. Wuming's hand left the backup machine as he stood up. That should do it. Wuming patted his dust-free hands. Master, is that all you need to do with the backup machine? Colossus' voice came from the side. There's no problem. Now, this backup machine of mine can replace me to protect the world between worlds. All of this started from, Wuming did not pay attention to the time. In short, it started from when Wuming ended his battle with Gidia. Just as Gidia said, Wuming had assimilated with the Black Origin mud, and Wuming's new moves were related to the new Origin power. Whether it was turning fluoros into the Black Origin mud, or summoning a terrifying amount of Black Origin mud to defeat Gidia, who almost killed himself, it was all because of the fusion of the black origin mud and the origin power. Wuming's new origin power. Although he did not understand the theory behind it, Wuming was not someone who was easily confused. Everything would be clear when he returned to the root of origin. However, after Wuming defeated Gidia, he did not kill it. Instead, he kept it alive. As for why he saved Gidia, it was not because of Wuming's kindness, but because Roman suddenly appeared in front of Wuming. Gidia, who had lost all its energy and almost died, was no different from before, or even worse. Roman used his connection with Gidia to successfully escape from Chaldea. Roman's words were simple. "Spare his life, please." As for the reason, Roman did not say. According to Roman, he seemed to have obtained information about Gidia when Floros was persuading him to surrender in Chaldea. After that, after Gidia was defeated by Wuming, he used the power of the 10th ring, which was the ring that Gidia was missing, to walk out of Chaldea and meet with Wuming. Wuming gave Roman a lot of face. He immediately agreed to Roman's request, or rather, he agreed to King Solomon's request. However, Roman's appearance was no longer that of Roman Aikman, but that of King Solomon, whom Wuming had seen at the Singularity in London. After all, Roman had used the power of King Solomon's ring. Naturally, Solomon, which was Roman's original appearance, was revealed. This also meant that Roman had exposed the secret that he was King Solomon in Chaldea. When Wuming asked Solomon about the expressions of the people in Chaldea when he transformed, Solomon's face was subtle. Wuming, who did not expose Solomon's secret, ended the questioning and sent Chaldea back to the original world. The world's people also recovered because of Gidia's loss of power. Chaldea could be said to have succeeded in saving the world. Although it was not direct, it could be regarded as saving the world indirectly. After that, Wuming did not rush to return to the Great Root. Instead, he stayed in Chaldea to help Chaldea deal with the remaining problems. After all, in that world, people's perception was that they just slept for a year. Not to mention ordinary people, the clock tower would definitely ask about it. What could those magicians do to Chaldea, the hero who saved the world? Even if he used his toes to think, Wuming knew what they would do to him. There was no doubt that the servants summoned in Chaldea would be repatriated, and Chaldea would be disintegrated. Chaldea's instruments and components would be preserved, sealed, and even studied by one magic family, organization, and even the clock tower. After all, Chaldea was a dangerous organization that crossed the timeline and had a large number of servants that could be regarded as weapons of war. Even if Chaldea saved the world, the magicians of the clock tower would certainly not allow Chaldea to continue to exist. Moreover, there was no direct evidence to prove that Chaldea saved the world. What about Chaldea's data records? Video records? Sorry, it could also be achieved by using magic. There were also many magicians who believed that something did happen in this blank year, but Chaldea only survived for a year because of the magnetic field, that is, he spent this period of time awake and wanted to take credit for it. In short, Chaldea would face a lot of trouble. Although it was said that Olga Marie, Da Vinci, Roman, and others would not be difficult to solve all the problems, but it was still slightly difficult for them to solve all the problems once and for all. Olga Marie's third method was not yet understood, so she was not the third magician. Although Da Vinci was omnipotent, she was, after all, a weapon recognized by the clock tower. After Roman became Roman and asked Wuming to spare Gidia's life, he resumed his identity as Roman. With his temperament, it was impossible for him to let King Solomon appear again. Roman was just a Roman, the highest person in charge of Chaldea's medical department. These three, whether taken out individually or together, were not enough. At least, most of the magicians in the clock tower would not buy it. Therefore, they needed Wuming's help. Wuming went directly to the clock tower. In a room that Wuming often visited in the clock tower, Wuming found that person. Second Enchanter, Gemstone Onkashia Zelrich Subian Ogu. Wuming easily met Zelik. Wuming even suspected that this guy had already guessed that Wuming would go to him for help. That's right, Wuming looked for Zelik to let Zelik help Chaldea deal with the aftermath. As the second magician, there would always be people who would give him face. Even if they did not give him face, Zelik also had a lot of connections. It would be quite easy for him to help deal with the aftermath. And Wuming also asked Zelik for a list of magicians and magician families who would definitely make a move against Chaldea. That night, he turned into something terrifying and visited these magicians. He bluntly told them that if they still wanted to reach out to Chaldea, the next time they would be annihilated. Finally, Wuming also tampered with the magic seals that had been passed down in their families in front of these magicians. This was a naked conspiracy. Those magicians who could not resist Wuming at all could only choose to compromise in fear. Now, Chaldea had a very long buffer. As long as Olga Marie mastered the third magician, at that time, coupled with Olga Marie's status as one of the 12 monarchs, she would definitely have the right to speak no less than Zelik. The third magician was one of the 5 remaining magicians in the world. The other magician also had the help of a powerful magician who could travel through time and summon servants. There was also a powerful existence who could tamper with the magic seals of the Clock Tower magician family. With these, there was no doubt that Chaldea would not be in any danger. Speaking of danger, Wuming thought of another thing. Callis, I remember that there was an alien existence outside Chaldea, right? Chapter 1054. Wuming turned to look at Callis. Master, don't worry, Enkidu is basically done, he's taking care of the aftermath. When Wuming put Chaldea back in place, he accidentally discovered an existence that could be called an alien. This existence was paying attention to Chaldea, who had returned to the Type Moon world. Ignoring whether or not the other party had bad intentions, they definitely didn't have any good intentions for sneaking around. Wuming even suspected that Gidia took Chaldea out of the Type Moon world to protect Chaldea. In short, Enkidu, who didn't think he was of much help, volunteered to take care of this matter. After figuring out the other party's identity, it was easy to let them go if they were harmless. As the Heavenlock, Enkidu was the most powerful weapon in human history. Adding on the fact that Enkidu had been by Wuming's side for so long, he had absorbed a lot of origin power, which made Enkidu extraordinary. Wuming even personally injected new origin power into Enkidu just in case. It could be said that Enkidu could go to the Type Moon world and call himself a god, because no one was a match for the current Enkidu. Any attack that Enkidu casually released now could be considered an attack against Su Jing. As for the alien that Wuming sensed, Enkidu wouldn't be afraid of it at all. That was indeed the case. Callis had already said that Enkidu had already taken care of those matters and was taking care of the aftermath. Since that was the case, Chaldea had nothing to worry about. However, speaking of worry, Wuming felt that the one he should be worried about was Callis. Wuming secretly glanced at Callis, who was floating beside him. The current Callis was no longer wearing a dragon horn headdress, but she was still not human. The current Callis was somewhat similar to rubies and sapphires, but the rubies and sapphires were pentagrams and hexagons with wings and bows in the middle. On the other hand, Alice was a transparent hollow sphere with sharp dragon wings. In the center of the sphere, there were 3 metal rings that rotated irregularly. In the center of the 3 rings, there was a little light, like a star. It had to be said that the current Callis was very similar to Ruby and Sapphire. However, they were sisters, so it was normal for them to be similar. After all, Callis' full name was Callis Balit, or Lapis Lazuli. Like Ruby and Sapphire Saphia, Callis was just Wuming's abbreviation for her. As for whether or not Callis could become a wand like the Ruby and Sapphire, this question was temporarily ignored. By the way, Callis, I've always had a question. Looking at the current appearance of Callis, Wuming finally asked the question that had been in his heart. Now that I clearly have a way to turn you into a human, why don't you agree and instead choose this appearance? Wuming revealed a helpless expression, not knowing whether to laugh or cry. Compared to the appearance of a human, I still prefer the style of my sister's phone. Kelly replied in a serious tone. However, Wuming revealed an expression of, I knew you would say that. It must be Ruby who bewitched you. Wuming responded to Collis with a gaze that saw through everything. And Collis fell into a rare silence. It seems that I guessed right. Wuming sighed. It couldn't be helped. Who told Wuming to pick up Mayu in the past 2 days? More than once he saw Ruby give up on accompanying Ilya and secretly follow him instead. Wuming glanced at Collis again. He had no intention of blaming her. I actually wanted you to experience the life of a human, but since you like this appearance, we'll leave it at that for now. After all, when Collis thought things through one day, Wuming could use the power of the Great Origin to turn Collis into a human at any time. Let's go. The arrangements here have been completed. After some time, come back and check on it, we can proceed with the next step of the plan. Wuming patted Collis, who seemed to be thinking about something. Yes, Master. Wuming opened a golden teleportation door and directly went in. Meanwhile, Collis was still absent-minded. She was thinking about what Ruby had said about bewitching her. Magical girl, Collis thought as she floated and also entered the teleportation door. In Ilya's world, Shuoyu residence. A golden ripple appeared, and Wuming emerged from it. After Wuming came out of the teleportation door, the first thing he did was to look at the clock on the table. At this time, Mayu should be done with school soon. Master, I'll go and prepare to welcome Lady Mayu. After flying out of the golden ripple, Collis directly flew toward the door, out of the door, and out of the door. At the door, there was a surge of magic, and a rather expensive red convertible car appeared there. This was a transformation of Collis. She had the ability to mimic. As for the size of the object she mimicked, she could do so with magic. Wuming, who was standing in front of the window and watching this scene, did not know what to say. Ever since Collis transformed into a ruby or sapphire, Collis had become even stranger. If it was in the past, Collis would definitely not have transformed into a car for Wuming to pick up Mayu. However, now, Collis would transform into a different car almost every time Wuming went to pick up Mayu. Classic, expensive, ordinary. There were all kinds of cars. This even caused Mayu's friends in school to be amazed. It could only be said that Collis was now supporting Wuming and paying more attention to daily life. She was no longer focused on combat. Forget it. I can only blame myself. Wuming sighed. Collis' change might have been caused by Wuming's words back then. Wuming's original intention was to let Collis live alone. Collis probably thought that Wuming no longer needed Collis. Although that was indeed the case, after all, the secret of the black soil and the root of everything was completely understood when Wuming returned to the root of everything after resolving the matter with Chaldea. Wuming had also entered the stage of adulthood. After Wuming returned to the root of everything became a little enthusiastic as though it was welcoming a blood-related relative. That's right, it was enthusiastic. After that, Wuming also received the information and secrets that he needed to know from the root of everything. There was only one root dragon. If one had to describe it, the root dragon was the materialization of the root of everything. It did not mean that the root of everything could create a new one after the root dragon died. Therefore, the root dragon that White Yiksha had seen back then was Wuming. As for the problem of the root dragon's reincarnation, becoming weak, the root dragon would actually fall into a deep slumber with the root of everything and would recover after a certain period of time after the root of everything's reincarnation. It would not fall into a certain world when it was extremely weak. In other words, Wuming's situation was just an accident. Chapter 1055. When Wuming was weakened from his slumber, he accidentally wandered into a certain world. As for the reason, it was naturally the origin black soil. The origin black soil was the dust of a dead world, while the origin black soil was in slumber. When the origin reincarnated, its origin power would naturally fall into slumber as well. During this period, there would definitely be worlds that were unable to save themselves and were destroyed, which was why most worlds perished. Since the origin had a lifespan, worlds naturally had a lifespan as well. The origin could reincarnate, but worlds couldn't, and worlds would eventually reach their end, which was why a small number of worlds perished. These dead worlds would then turn into dust and return to the origin. The dust produced by these worlds that had reached the end of their lifespan and died naturally wouldn't affect the origin at all, and could even replenish the origin's energy, just like how fallen leaves return to their roots. As for the destroyed worlds, they were much more troublesome. The origin was like a mother who unconditionally spoiled her child, fully accepting and taking care of the dust of these worlds. Firstly, the origin felt guilty for not being able to save its child as a mother. After the dust entered the origin, it would fuse with the origin power, and the resulting product would be the origin black soil. Secondly, the origin wanted to use the origin black soil to recreate new worlds, which could also be considered as compensation for the destroyed worlds. As for why the origin black soil was able to counter Wuming, it was because the origin black soil contained negative origin power, which was also why Wuming was able to counter the origin black soil. The negative emotions of a dead world were left behind in the dust, which fused with the origin power and naturally became negative origin power. The reason why Wuming was able to escape from the origin and wander into a certain world was also due to the increase of the origin black soil. As more and more origin black soil was absorbed, the origin couldn't contain it anymore. Worlds weren't something that could be created at will, and even the origin needed time to recreate the origin black soil into a new world. Furthermore, the worlds between worlds were so vast that there was no end to them. The number of worlds that existed between worlds was probably more than 1 trillion, and as the root of origin and the root of origin slept and reincarnated, countless worlds that were heading towards destruction would turn into dust and passively be drawn into the root of origin, fusing with the root of origin and becoming origin black mud. Whether it was a few cycles or a dozen, the black origin soil was indeed being consumed and reforged into one world after another. However, as the great origin cycles became frequent, more and more black origin soil accumulated in the great origin, eventually causing the great origin to overload itself. Wuming and most of the black origin soil hence flowed out, leaving only a little bit of black origin soil in the great origin, the black origin soil that Wuming had seen when he first entered the great origin. The reason for the frequent reincarnation cycles of the great origin was actually very simple. It was caused by too much dust from the death of a world. The great origin would produce root of origin power to fuse with the dust, but as the world died faster, the great origin would have to produce root of origin power faster. This would put a burden on the great origin, causing the great origin's reincarnation cycle to accelerate, causing Wuming and the black origin soil to flow out. It was like a sealed water bag that was filled to the brim, and if more water was poured in, the bag would explode and all the water would flow out. This was how the black origin soil flowed between worlds, and some even accidentally entered them. It was also because of this that Wuming entered a certain world and was adopted as a normal infant. Although Wuming now knew everything, this was still a difficult problem that had no solution. The only solution was to start with the creatures that lived in each world. The creatures that lived in each world would develop, be it through technology or magic, but once they reached a certain level of development, these creatures would seek to reach even higher heights, which was why they had already faced the threat of destruction. In other words, they would destroy themselves as well as the world they lived in, which was the cause of the destruction of most worlds. For example, Mayo's world was destroyed because of the Ainsworth family. However, because the M-shaped moon world had evolved into a parallel world, it indirectly resolved the threat of destruction. Even if Mayo's world was destroyed, the M-shaped moon world would still be fine. But in the end, Mayo's world was still saved by Wuming. Most worlds didn't evolve into parallel worlds, which meant that if the intelligent creatures that lived in those worlds caused a world crisis like the Ainsworth family did, the only outcome for that world would be destruction. However, it was extremely difficult to start from this aspect. Once an intelligent creature reached a certain level of development, it was unavoidable for them to explore even higher heights. This was a necessity for any creature that lived in this world. But the key was whether or not these intelligent creatures could adapt to the next height and control it. If they could adapt and control it well, the world would continue to operate as usual, and the intelligent creatures would continue to live. But if they couldn't adapt and control it well, the world would very likely be destroyed. So, how could one change the creatures of a world and make them give up on exploring higher heights when they weren't confident enough? Wuming could only think of one way, which was to become the god of that world. However, there were so many worlds, and Wuming naturally couldn't do them one by one. Wuming was testing the backup machine in preparation for this plan. This was the plan that Wuming and Collis had discussed before leaving the route. However, this was still a big plan, and the route wasn't omnipotent. The details of the plan still needed Wuming to prepare, and only then could they rely on the route to complete the plan. Let's go pick up Mayu first. Wuming shook his head and stopped thinking about it. Wuming jumped out of the window, walked to the door, opened the door, and got in. Your sunglasses. Collis spoke like an intelligent voice, and a pair of sunglasses popped out from the steering wheel. Wuming grabbed it and put it on his eyes. After all, it was a convertible. Wuming had requested that Collis provide sunglasses when driving such a car. Then, let's go. However, before the car started, the door to the front passenger seat opened, and a beautiful lady got in. It wasn't winter, but she was still wearing a white fox fur coat, and it was the kind that covered her whole body tightly. The lady flipped her pink waist-length hair and smiled at Wuming. Although the lady was wrapped up tightly, it was as if she wasn't wearing anything. Her charm was completely reflected on her face. Maeve? Why are you here? Wuming was shocked and quickly looked around to see if there were any passers-by. That's right, it was Maeve. Chapter 1056. Why was Maeve here? Of course, it was because Wuming had discussed with the suppression force and asked the suppression force to bring the Maeve Wuming knew from the moment before her death to this era. This way, it would not destroy history, and it would allow Wuming to see the original her. Although it would be better to directly ask the suppression force to take over history, Wuming felt that it was unfair to Maeve. That history, that story, were all created by Maeve herself, and Wuming had no right to take it away. In short, Maeve came to the modern era, and it was the modern era of Ilya's parallel world, and settled down and survived. And Maeve's wish, in fact, as long as Wuming was here, Maeve had nothing to be dissatisfied with. Perhaps the only thing that Maeve was dissatisfied with was that Wuming could not be with her all the time. Maeve rested her body, tilted her head, leaned forward, and lay directly on Wuming's shoulder. The familiar body fragrance entered Wuming's nose. Of course I'm here to look for my dear. As soon as Maeve spoke, the surrounding air was filled with charm. Don't worry, I've already set up a spell to disperse idlers around. No one will come after all. Maeve was also a druid. Maeve's charm could be called forced hypnosis for ordinary men. Even if Maeve was wrapped up so tightly, once a passerby passed by, it would be easy to attract them. Wuming, who had experienced such an incident once, did not want to experience it again. Wuming breathed a sigh of relief, then looked directly into Maeve's eyes. Didn't I tell you to stay at home obediently? You didn't listen to me again. Although it was a reproach, it was more or less flirting. However, immediately after, Maeve showed a hint of jealousy. You still know that we have a family, then why do you always come to look for your little sister? Could it be that you like her? At that moment, Wooming directly gave Maeve a knock on the head. Mayu is just my little sister. As her only relative in this world, I have to take care of her, don't I? There was nothing wrong with this. After all, Shiro in Mayo's world was still in Mayo's world. In Ilya's world, Mayu indeed only had Wooming as a relative. Wooming felt a little helpless as he reached out to rub Maeve's tearful little head. Besides, I've already explained Mayo's situation to you. Leah and Jihan can understand, and even Master Skaha agrees with my actions. Besides, how old is Mayu? Why are you jealous? Artoria and Joan of Arc were also brought to the modern world by Wooming through the same method. After the Battle of Cameron, Artoria was brought to this world on the ship to the Land of Ideals, while Joan of Arc was brought to this world a second before she was burned to death. Whether it was Maeve, Artoria, or Joan of Arc's injuries at that time, they were all healed instantly by the power of suppression, which could be considered as doing Wooming a favor. After Artoria and Joan of Arc came to this era, they were very well behaved and didn't ask anything. Because of Wooming, Artoria wasn't so obsessed with the country. As for Joan of Arc, she was just taking advantage of the situation to save the country. The current France was no longer the France of hundreds of years ago. Without obsession, the two of them listened to Wooming and lived in Winterwood City peacefully. As for Skaha, Wooming personally went to the Country of Shadows to invite her out and even fought her because of it. However, Skaha wasn't surprised that Wooming could find her, nor was she surprised that Wooming would come to her. After all, Skaha was the first person to know about Wooming's identity as the source of power. The fight also dispelled Skaha's thoughts of suicide. The reason why a person would seek death wasn't because she couldn't die, but because she couldn't find the meaning to continue living on this basis. That was why she sought death. Wooming found meaning for Skaha, so she didn't want to die anymore. When he first met Wooming, Skaha had pinned all his hopes on him. As for the people he taught later, like Kukulin and the others, they were just for fun while Skaha was waiting for Wooming. Skaha hoped that one day Wooming could kill her, so she had high hopes for Wooming. She taught Wooming everything she knew and even threw herself at him emotionally. Not only did Wooming treat Skaha as his older sister, but Skaha also treated Wooming as her younger brother. As for why they weren't mother and son, well, after all, their ages didn't match. Speaking of mother, Wooming thought of Tiamat. Tiamat also came to this era. However, because he still couldn't let go, Wooming arranged for Enkidu and Tiamat to live on the other side of Winterwood City, one city away from Artoria, Jean, and Maeve. That's right, he didn't want them to see each other. In fact, Wooming didn't want Mayu, Ilya, and Tiamat to see each other for the time being. The main reason was that Wooming wasn't used to having Tiamat as his mother. Wooming couldn't imagine what it would be like if Tiamat called him a child in front of everyone, but it would be terrible. Wooming couldn't help but shudder, and the hand that was massaging Maeve's head became heavier. Maeve's expression became more comfortable after being massaged by Wooming, but Wooming's action made Maeve break out of her comfort. Looking at Wooming's unnatural face, Maeve was a little worried. What's wrong? Nothing. Wooming must be hiding something from Maeve. No matter how stupid Maeve was, she could see it. However, she still chose to respect this man, and she led the conversation back to the previous topic. Although we have a family, if you don't accompany me, I'll be unhappy. Artoria, Jean, and Maeve lived together in a big house in the suburbs. However, because the house was very big and there were many rooms, Maeve could only barely share a room with Artoria and Jean. It couldn't be helped, Maeve's temperament was slightly disliked by the two. On the contrary, Artoria and Jean were very happy to talk to each other, and they even called each other sisters. Although the two of them did look very similar, only their faces were similar. At least, the difference in their breasts was sometimes very big. However, Maeve had changed a lot during this period in Winterwood City. She wrapped herself up tightly when she went out, but at home, Maeve was still slutty. According to Maeve, in order to change a little in front of Wooming, and at the same time, it was also a foundation to build a good relationship with Artoria and Jean. And Artoria and Jean also saw that Maeve had indeed changed, so the relationship between the three of them had eased during this period of time. However, Wooming basically didn't see her. As Maeve said, Wooming basically lived in Mayo's house. After all, it was to take care of Mayu. It was understandable that Maeve sneaked out to Wooming. Knowing Maeve's temperament, Wooming didn't want to reason with Maeve. Anyway, he was not in the right, so he just let Maeve do whatever she wanted. It is indeed my fault. Then how do you want me to make it up to you? I will definitely do it. Wooming's hand touched Maeve's head again. Really? Maeve gently grabbed Wooming's hand and put it on her face. Her expression was quite charming. Of course it's true. Wooming replied righteously. Then, I want to do it 10 times tonight. Maeve's expression became more and more charming. Wooming even felt a little bit. Turning his head, Wooming's cheeks were a little bit red. Are you serious? The number of times the two talked about was naturally the number of times they should do it at night. On the night Maeve came to this era, because she experienced the intertwining of life and death, plus meeting Wooming, Maeve, who couldn't bear the loneliness, successfully took the first spot of Wooming. In a sense, Wooming had matured. And coincidentally, that day was also the day Wooming crossed the inexplicable threshold inside the root and became an adult root dragon. By the way, Maeve was the same as Wooming. That was also the reason why Artoria and Jean started to accept Maeve. No matter how promiscuous a woman was, if she kept her purity for the man she loved, Artoria and Jean couldn't say anything. By the way, because Maeve took the first spot of Wooming, Artoria and Jean finally decided to attack Wooming at night on the second and third night respectively. Although Wooming was a little regretful that he didn't have three, for Wooming and Maeve, who already had sex, Maeve's request was nothing to Wooming. Okay then. Wooming agreed. After all, 10 times didn't sound like much. And Maeve also smiled. Wooming, who didn't have much experience, didn't know what 10 times was. But he would know tonight. Master, at this time, Master Mayu should be out of school. Oh no, I'm late. Forget it, call us, I'll go first. Wait for me here. Wooming urged Collis anxiously and then opened the golden ripple outside the car door. You too. Be good and don't run around. After Wooming said that, he jumped out of the car in a panic and directly jumped into the portal. Maeve, on the other hand, rested her chin on her hands and looked at the place where Wooming left with a happy smile. What, as expected, my sister is the most important. Although Maeve's tone was full of blame, her happiness overflowed. And Maeve's smile was still charming, but it was also full of happiness. Chapter 1057. At the entrance of the private Suigunhara Academy's primary school. At this moment, it had been some time since school ended. Other than the primary school students who stayed behind to participate in club activities, there was almost no one at the school entrance. As for why it was almost, it was because there were still a few primary school students pacing back and forth at the entrance of the primary school. That. Mayut-chan, is your brother not here yet? Gue Mimi, who had a gentle personality, looked around cautiously as if she was looking for someone. Beside Gue Mimi, Mayu carried her little backpack obediently and waited as if she wasn't in a hurry at all. She was quite calm. It's fine. Actually, you don't have to wait with me. Although Mayu's tone was still cold, compared to how Mayu treated Gue Mimi and the others in the beginning, it was a huge improvement. What are you saying? How can we leave you here alone to wait? Yujinza Ryuko beside Gue Mimi shouted as if he was willing to die for Meiyu. Alright, I know that Ryuko cares about Meiyu-chan. Stop shouting. Ryuko is very conspicuous like this. Who knows when he will be targeted by human traffickers and be kidnapped. Moriyama Nanakuro beside Yujinza Ryuko narrowed her eyes and smiled as she spoke to Yujinza Ryuko. Human traffickers. I'm not afraid. Although that was what he said, Ryuko's legs were already trembling. Standing beside Ilya, Kurihara Tarika, who was silently complaining in her heart, sighed helplessly. By the way, with Meiyu and Ilya's relationship, can't you let Meiyu stay at Ilya's place for a while? Kurihara Tarika suggested. This. Ilya, who was beside Meiyu, didn't know what to do. After all, she couldn't say that she actually wanted to be picked up by Wuming like Meiyu. Brother Wuming said that he would come back to pick me up every day. I believe in Brother Wuming. Meiyu's words helped Ilya out of her predicament. But, if Meiyu-chan's brother is really delayed by something, will Meiyu-chan really have to wait here forever? Gue Mimi was right. Waiting like this was not a solution. Why don't we go to the arcade and play for a while? Play my ass. Kurihara Keihua clenched her fist and pretended to hit Yujinza Ryuko. Yujinza Ryuko quickly hid behind Gue Mimi. Gue Mimi was at a loss, while Moriyama Nanao Tortoise was watching with a smile. This was the daily life of the four little ones, and Ilya did not find it strange. However, Ilya turned to look at Meiyu, who was silently waiting for her. Did Big Brother really run into some trouble today? Could it be Ruby's doing? Ilya recalled that Ruby seemed to be following Wuming and couldn't help but worry. I'll have to ask Ruby later. Ilya thought so. Just as the four little ones were fooling around and Ilya's thoughts were flying, Meiyu saw something, and her eyes lit up. Then, she moved. Meiyu. Ilya was the first to notice Meiyu's movement, and then the four little ones also noticed it. Looking in the direction Meiyu ran, Wuming saw the person who moved Meiyu. It's Big Brother. It's Meiyu's brother. That's right, it was Wuming who lost track of time while chatting with my Fu. Wuming hugged Meiyu, who threw herself into his arms. Sorry, Meiyu, I was delayed by something. Although Wuming's words were somewhat insincere, Meiyu didn't care. As long as Wuming could come, she was already very happy. It's okay, Brother Wuming. Then, Meiyu left Wuming's arms and stood beside Wuming. Big Brother, did anything happen? Ilya also walked over and asked cautiously. Ilya always felt that Ruby would do something. Even if she didn't do it now, she would do it in the future. Ilya expressed that she didn't believe in Ruby's character. It's okay, I just met an acquaintance and chatted for a while. Wuming shook his head, indicating that it was okay. Meiyu, Ilya, and the others didn't know about my Fu and the others, so Wuming could only explain it this way. Ah. So Meiyu's brother made us wait with Meiyu for so long because he likes the new and hates the old. Yujinza, who was the most lively, jumped out first. Don't be like this, Ryuko, it's very rude. Gue Mimi pulled Yujinza's sleeve, looking a little embarrassed. Ryuko has indeed said too much. Kurihara Takika pushed her glasses, then looked at Moriyama Nanao. Moriyama Nanao, who understood, continued to smile with squinted eyes. But Meiyu-chan's brother did forget about Meiyu because he was chatting with others, so we waited with Meiyu for a long time. Wuming smiled helplessly as he watched the four little ones singing one another's tune. In that case, I'll compensate you. Immediately, the four children's eyes lit up. Children were naturally interested in compensation, rewards, and other things. Only Ilya waved her hand awkwardly. Big Brother, actually, there's no need. Ilya, who was speaking halfway, was glared at by Kurihara Takika and Moriyama Nanao, and immediately shut her mouth in fear. Mayo's brother is so rich, why don't he treat us to an arcade? As expected of Yujinza Ryuko's choice, she couldn't forget about the arcade. Mayo's brother has been picking up Mayu in a different luxury car every day. Kurihara Takika saw it clearly. Wuming, who had returned from a business trip abroad, Mayu told the 4 children, drove different cars to pick up Mayu. Kurihara Takika, who was considered mature among the 4 children, couldn't recognize all of them, but she could tell that they weren't ordinary cars. The 4 children and Ilya also took a few rides, and Kurihara Takika could feel that these cars were very luxurious. However, it was very likely that Wuming rented them. After all, who would buy so many cars for no reason? In other words, Mayu-chan's brother is treating us to an amusement park, so what? Moriyama Nanao successfully cooperated with Kurihara Takika. As a qualified elementary school student, the 2 of them wanted to see how Wuming would respond. Would he force himself to treat them to an amusement park, or would he find an excuse to avoid it? This was a big test for Mayu-chan. Amusement park. Gue Mimi was shocked. This isn't good. Gue Mimi, who didn't have the same thoughts as Kurihara Takika and Moriyama Nanao, was worried that this request was too rude. Yes, actually, we just need to go to an arcade. Yujinza Ryuko, who wasn't as smart as Gue Mimi, was also worried. They were just classmates with Mayu, and they weren't related. How could they ask her brother to take them to an amusement park after accompanying Mayu for a while? Ilya-chan, say something. Gue Mimi looked at Ilya for help. This. Ilya, who knew Wuming's background, didn't know what to say. Wuming definitely didn't lack money. Although she also wanted to go to the amusement park, he was Mayo's brother, not her brother. Then let's go. Mayu made the final decision. Mayo's words stunned the 4 little ones. Since Mayu has said so, then today, I will take you to the amusement park to play. I hope it's not too late. After all, this is related to how long you can play in the amusement park. Wuming also made up his mind. Moreover, Wuming's expression didn't have the slightest hint of pain or anything to hide. It was as if he was deciding on something as normal as eating and drinking. Hey. The 4 little ones were stunned. Gue Mimi and Yujinza Ryuko didn't expect Mayo's brother to actually agree to such a rude request. What surprised Kurihara Tarika and Moriyama Nanakura was that Wuming didn't have any problems agreeing to it. Could it be that Mayo's brother was actually really rich? Paw! Wuming snapped his fingers, and 2 luxury cars instantly appeared at the intersection. With a turn, they arrived in front of everyone. This scene caused a commotion in the surroundings. After all, this was the entrance of an elementary school, and next to it was the entrance of a middle school. Moreover, the location of the private Suihara Academy wasn't remote, and there were many passers-by. In the next second, 2 drivers wearing black suits and sunglasses got down from the car. They looked like bodyguards. They elegantly and luxuriously opened the doors of the luxury cars. They bowed and extended their hands, inviting everyone to get in. The 4 little ones were stunned. Even Ilya, who had never seen such a scene before, was stunned on the spot. Let's go, everyone. Wuming elegantly bowed to the 4 little ones, dragging them back to reality from their stupor. Oh! However, the exclamations of the elementary school students instantly resounded throughout the entire private Suihara Academy. Chapter 1058. After the 4 little ones spoke to their families on the phone, they got into the car behind. As for Ilya, Wuming personally called Scylla. Then, she got into the car in front with Mayu and Wuming and went to the amusement park. Because they had indeed wasted a lot of time, and the elementary school students still had to go to school tomorrow. They did not play at the amusement park for long. Near the end of the night, Wuming got a limousine out of nowhere and drove it back to the four little ones and Ilya, who still wanted to have more fun. When they finally sent Ilya home, Scylla chatted with Wuming for a while. Scylla even wanted to ask Wuming to stay for dinner, but in the end, she was rejected by Wuming. After bidding farewell to the reluctant Ilya, Wuming drove the ordinary car that had become normal at some point and drove back to the Shuiwei residence with Meiyu. The two cars and the bodyguard-like driver from before were all caused by Wuming using the rights he had obtained during his time in Winterwood City. Wuming had a lot of rights in Winterwood City in Meiyu's world, but in Winterwood City in Ilya's world, Wuming still had rights. However, these rights had just been obtained not long ago. He got Collis to transfer the dead and black accounts of all the banks in the world to his account through the internet. Through spending money, he set up a company, recruited employees, and provided technology. It was all done by Collis. After that, he went to visit the underworld leaders of Winterwood City. If he could use magic to hypnotize them, he would directly use magic to hypnotize them. Under special circumstances, he would directly place restrictions on those who could not be hypnotized. Wuming did not want these underworld leaders to secretly find people to deal with Wuming in the future. Although he was not afraid, it was indeed troublesome and would affect his mood, so Wuming wanted to end it once and for all. After that, Wuming also suggested to invest heavily in them. The effect of the stick and the carrot was basically very effective. Although these underworld leaders were unwilling, they would not go against money. After all, they also lived in this legal society. As long as they had enough money, they would be happy to let Wuming be the boss, and a boss who basically delegated power. Not to mention, Wuming's strength was also a big thigh for them, so why not do it? On the surface, Wuming was the boss of a big company, but in private, he had become the real ruler of Winterwood City. Although he basically did not care about Winterwood City's affairs, luxury cars, bodyguards, and drivers were basically a piece of cake. Before Wuming came to pick up Meiyu, he used the portal to see if Meiyu was still waiting at the entrance of the elementary school. When he saw the four elementary school students accompanying Meiyu and waiting with Meiyu, Wuming came up with the idea of inviting this group of elementary school students to play at the amusement park as a way of thanking them for accompanying Meiyu. Therefore, all of this was planned by Wuming long ago. The two cars were also ordered by Wuming in advance. As for the car that sent the elementary school students home, it was transformed by Collis. After sending off the four little ones, in order to not be so eye-catching and exaggerated, Collis became ordinary again on the road. Anyway, Ilya and Meiyu knew about Collis' existence, so there was no need to hide it from them. Meiyu, are you happy today? Wuming chatted with Meiyu, who was sitting in the front passenger seat. Yes, I'm very happy. Meiyu had a heartfelt smile on her face. Ever since Wuming solved the problem of the black mud, he had been accompanying Meiyu during this period of time. He personally sent her to and from school, and the meals she ate were also personally prepared by Wuming. At night, if she was not being coaxed to sleep by Wuming, she would fall asleep with him. It was not the first time he brought Meiyu to various places to play. There were even times when Meiyu and Wuming went out alone without Ilya's knowledge. In short, she felt that she was about to be spoiled by Wuming. However, Meiyu felt that she was quite happy. Glancing at Meiyu's smiling face, Wuming tried to speak. Meiyu, if someone else wants to participate in our lives, what would you think? Wuming's words were rather vague, and she did not know what he was referring to. However, as a perfect Superman, comparable to a PhD student, Meiyu seemed to have realized something, and the smile on her face gradually disappeared. Wuming, who saw this scene, realized that something was wrong. He immediately changed his tone and changed the topic. After all, we have always been two people. The Shoayu mansion is so big, it's not bad to raise some animals, right? Fortunately, the topic just now was very vague, and Meiyu did not immediately see anything. Otherwise, it would be hard to say. Animals. Meiyu could not help but be stunned. That's right. After all, I can't always be with you. Raising some animals in our house can also help you relieve your boredom. Although the problem of the black mud was solved, it did not mean that Wuming was free. Wuming's time with Meiyu was actually compensation for leaving Meiyu. Wuming still had a lot of things to deal with. It was also time for Nizalik to go back and deal with the situation of the big tomb. Although Wuming could move the big tomb now, it would not be easy for all the members of the big tomb to live honestly in Winterwood City. Wuming could not force the members of the big tomb, whose justice points were at least -500, to do good deeds. The only one with high justice points was the old butler, Seabass. Therefore, he had to arrange a place for them to live. There was also Irbiruai. How did she know Wuming's name? Even if she had seen the previous Wuming, he was not known by this name before. In fact, he did not even have a name before, only the name of the Dragon of Origin, which was both a race and a personal name. Wuming had to figure out what was going on. There was also the nameless spellbook that the dragon gave to Wuming. Wuming had to figure out the relationship between the dragon and himself. He also had to take care of the community in the box court world. After all, Wuming was also a member. Whether it was as a member of No Name or for the sake of Black Rabbit, Ren, Letitia, and the others, Wuming had to help the community grow. Moreover, he could not use his own power to forcibly improve the community. That would not only spoil the growth by excessive enthusiasm, but it would also be quite disrespectful to the community. Therefore, Wuming had to act like Sun Wukong needed to protect Tang Sanzang. This process was not easy. Moreover, Wuming had to deal with the conspiracy of the upper echelons of the box court. There was also Pest. Wuming had promised to help her, so he had to do it personally. But for better or for worse, No Name did not have to be taken over. No Name only had its meaning in the box court world. Also, Wuming had to return to the Godslayer world. Athena, Guinevere, and Lancelot had become the subordinate gods of Wuming, the last king. Wuming could not just ignore them. If nothing unexpected happened, he would definitely take over. After all, because of Wuming's identity as a Godslayer, he could not stay in the Godslayer world for too long. Wuming had a headache just thinking about that. How would the young female version of Guinevere in the Godslayer world meet the young female version of Guinevere in the Model Moon world? That was why Wuming did not choose to bring Guinevere and Artoria to the modern world, and only brought Artoria back. It was really difficult. There was also the world of the Star Cup. He had to go back and see what the god of games, Teto, had changed that world into. He was also very concerned about how Rick and Shiobi were doing. Most importantly, there was the problem of the root. A single cycle of reincarnation of the root was a very long time for long-lived species. But that did not mean that Wuming did not have to do anything about it. To prevent the black root soil from overloading the root and causing it to leak again, Wuming had to solve this problem no matter what. And the only solution now was to let Wuming, the god, exist in the many worlds, and let Wuming, the god, restrict them. And Wuming had been preparing all along. Chapter 1059. Putting that aside for now, Wuming needed to pay attention to Meiyu. Although Wuming changed the topic, this wasn't something that Wuming thought of casually. He also had the same thought. However, Meiyu's answer was out of Wuming's expectations. Brother Wuming, I'm actually not lonely. Angelica has been accompanying me while you weren't around. Wuming was taken aback. His foot that was stepping on the accelerator paused, but he immediately recovered. That's right. There's still Angelica. As Angelica was defeated by Wuming and picked up, she stayed in the Shuiyue residence. Julian also agreed to it. Wuming even made Angelica a maid. During the time that Wuming was away, Meiyu was taken care of by Angelica. Although Angelica was ice cold, it had to be said that once Angelica carried out orders, she was perfect. As a maid, Angelica would clean the Shuoyue residence 3 times a day and tidy it up neatly. At night, she would also read extracurricular books for Meiyu. During the day, she would prepare 3 meals in bento. Although they weren't top-notch, the taste was still rather delicious. Every time, Elia and the others would exchange meals with Meiyu so that they could have a taste of Meiyu's delicious bento. In addition to Wuming's performance today, perhaps the 4 primary school students had already treated Meiyu as a rich missy with a maid, a big family, and a huge business. In short, Angelica could be considered to be responsible for this family. Meiyu's impression of this former enemy had changed a lot. As for the reason why Wuming forgot about Angelica, it was because ever since Wuming returned, Angelica basically didn't have a sense of presence. Meiyu's 3 meals and bento were personally prepared by Wuming. When Meiyu slept, Wuming would either accompany her to sleep or read her stories. During the day, Wuming would bring Meiyu out to play when he was free. As for the cleanliness of the Shuoyue residence. In fact, the Shuoyue residence always had an automatic cleaning magic in operation. After all, this was Wuming's magic workshop and there was no need for someone to clean it 3 times a day. As for Angelica, because she had nothing to do, she basically sat in her room and stared blankly. She would also wait for Wuming and Meiyu to finish their meals before cooking. When Meiyu was at home, she would accompany Meiyu. When Meiyu wasn't at home, Wuming would go out. Gradually, Wuming and Angelica met less and less. Until now, Wuming had really forgotten about her. If it wasn't for Meiyu's reminder, Wuming didn't know how long it would take for him to realize this problem. Alright, now there was another problem of dealing with Angelica. Although Angelica has always been cold, I'm not lonely, so I don't need any small animals. Then, Meiyu's tone changed. Or are you saying that Brother Wuming, you're going to leave me again? Definitely not. Wuming refuted without thinking. This time, it really wasn't. The matter of the root black soil had been dealt with. Wuming didn't have anything particularly important to do. Even if he had to deal with the people and things that Wuming encountered in other worlds, he wouldn't be as anxious as dealing with Gidia. Moreover, Wuming could change the flow of time in this world through the root black soil. He could completely deal with everything in other worlds, but only a few seconds had passed in this world. However, Wuming didn't need to do that. After all, he just said that he wasn't in a hurry to deal with things in other worlds, so he could take it slowly. As long as it's not, Meiyu mumbled softly. Wuming stopped the car and rubbed Meiyu's little head. Don't worry, Big Brother will accompany you. I won't leave you again. I believe in Brother Wuming. The 2 siblings chatted in the car for a while before getting out. Wuming stopped not to rub Meiyu's head, but because they had arrived at the entrance of the Shuoyu residence. After getting out of the car, Kalas transformed back into a ball with wings and followed behind Wuming. Master, young lady, you're back. A cold voice came from the door. Angelica. Why are you out? Wuming ignored the way Angelica addressed him and Meiyu. Angelica would usually be in a daze in her room at this time. After all, it wasn't time to clean up, and there was still some time before cooking. Today is the fixed day to purchase ingredients. Angelica was like a qualified maid as she answered Wuming respectfully. Brother Wuming, our family's ingredients and daily necessities are all purchased by Angelica at a fixed time. Today is indeed the day. While Meiyu and Wuming were chatting, Angelica had already walked past them and arrived at the roadside. At this time, a few refrigerated cars arrived at the entrance of the Shuoyu residence. As usual, put down the goods and you can leave. I've already transferred the money to your account. Angelica was as dignified as a boss. Her last sentence was obviously directed at the driver who got off the first car, who was obviously not the driver. The drivers who got out of the cars, including the driver from the first car, all bowed to Angelica. "Thank you, big sister." It wasn't the first time they quickly unloaded the goods. After that, the drivers got into the car and left without stopping. What's going on? Wuming looked at Meiyu in confusion. "I gave the money that Brother Wuming you left at the Shuoyu residence to Angelica. Angelica used her brain to earn more money, and she even built a good relationship with the sellers." According to Meiyu, Angelica had built a good relationship with the sellers in terms of food, clothing, and daily necessities. Every time she needed something, the sellers would deliver it to her door, and Angelica would even give them a tip. Therefore, Angelica was a customer that couldn't be offended. Wuming, who knew this, couldn't help but twitch the corner of his mouth. Wuming had a feeling that Angelica didn't just build a good relationship with the sellers with money, she might have even beaten them up. One must know that the company represented by the logo on the refrigerated car that delivered the goods just now, although it was an ordinary company in Winterwood City, it wasn't ordinary at all. The boss of the company had some magic background, and Wuming's magic hint was resisted by him. However, it seemed like he used some kind of tool, but it still showed that he wasn't an ordinary person. Although he was still forcibly restrained in the end. The driver who got out of the first car was actually the boss of the company. Wuming felt that the guy would definitely make a move on a fat sheep like Angelica. Only after being beaten up and understanding the difference between the two would they say something like, "Big sister." However, this had nothing to do with him. If Angelica was willing, then she could be the big sister. Anyway, the man wasn't a good person, so it didn't matter if she stood on top of him. Wuming's mouth twitched when he saw Angelica directly use displacement magic to transfer the ingredients away. These goods were all packed in boxes, but there was a lot of them. If it wasn't for the Shuoyu residence's geographical location near the edge of the city, this would definitely cause a commotion. Angelica and Meiyu were the same kind of people in some ways. They were people who didn't care about common sense or didn't know much about it. "Angelica, come find me later. I have something to talk to you about." Wuming started to deal with Angelica's problem. Chapter 1060. Under Meiyu's curious gaze, Wuming and Angelica entered a certain room and came out after about half an hour. However, they weren't doing anything indescribable. Wuming simply wanted to have a chat with Angelica about whether she should continue staying here. Firstly, Julian had a lot of things to do back then. Angelica was staying in the Shuoyu residence, so it was easier for Julian to have one less person. Secondly, Angelica thought that she had been abandoned and was picked up by Wuming, who didn't kill her. Thereafter, she acknowledged Wuming as her master. Thirdly, even though Wuming didn't realize this problem due to Meiyu's excessive independence, Angelica had indeed taken on the role of Wuming's nanny when Meiyu wasn't around. These were the three reasons why Wuming wanted Angelica to stay. But now that Wuming was back and Julian was almost done with his preparations, Angelica could return. Wuming knew that Julian still had feelings for his elder sister. Wuming wouldn't forcefully separate the siblings. Perhaps after Angelica returned, Julian could instill feelings and memories into her, allowing the emotionless Angelica to truly revive as Julian's elder sister. Although reviving the dead was a taboo in any world and it wasn't a true revival, Wuming didn't mind. However, it was still up to Julian and Angelica to decide on their own. Even though Angelica lacked emotions, she wasn't a complete puppet. In the end, Angelica made a decision. "I want to go back and take a look." Wuming and Meiyu bid farewell to Angelica, who returned to Meiyu's world. "Meiyu, go do your homework. I'll prepare dinner for you." "Okay." Meiyu nodded lightly and walked into her room. Wuming also walked to the kitchen and began his simple but realistic dinner life. Then, Wuming saw Maeve, who was wrapped in a towel, walking out of the bathroom. Maeve. Wuming hurriedly lowered his voice, afraid that Meiyu would hear him. Wuming didn't want to see the scene of Meiyu pointing at my Fu with a face full of resentment and asking Wuming who this woman is. But, my dear, you didn't let me go, Maeve smiled charmingly. Since she didn't let her go, Maeve volunteered to stay. As for why Angelica didn't stop Maeve, it was because Angelica knew about the relationship between Wuming and Maeve. Angelica even knew about the existence of Artoria, Joan of Arc, Skaha, and Tiamat. It couldn't be helped. Because of ignoring Angelica, Wuming basically didn't hide anything from Angelica. And because of her lack of emotions, Angelica didn't deliberately avoid Wuming because her thoughts were different from ordinary people. Therefore, Angelica could be said to be the person who understood Wuming the most right now. My queen, please don't play with me. Wuming hurriedly opened the portal and signaled Maeve to leave quickly. Give me double tonight and I'll leave. Maeve said arrogantly. Okay. I'll promise you anything. Wuming pushed Maeve into the portal. Then, Wuming let out a long sigh. It seems that the first thing that needs to be dealt with is the issue of Meiyu and Maeve meeting. After all, it's not a solution to keep hiding it, brother Wuming. Did I just hear a woman's voice? Meiyu suddenly walked out from the corner. It's nothing. I was just talking to Collis, who is practicing voice changing on what ingredients to use tonight. In an instant, Collis, who was beside Wuming, became the scapegoat. Yes. What else could Collis say? She could only help Wuming cover it up. Just do as usual. Meiyu said softly and didn't want to disturb Wuming anymore and returned to her room. Wuming let out a sigh of relief. Fortunately, Shuoyu's house was big enough. Otherwise, it would be really troublesome. However, what Wuming didn't know was what kind of disaster he was going to face tonight. It was the next morning in the timeline. In the mansion that Wuming bought for Artoria, Jean, and Maeve, Wuming walked out of Maeve's room with a pained expression and met the adult version of Artoria. Because of the restraints, Artoria has all the memories of the Middle East singularity, so sometimes Artoria can't help but transform into her adult form. That's why Wuming said that Artoria and Jean's breasts were, sometimes, different. However, Artoria's transformation from time to time brought double the joy to Wuming. Are you okay? Artoria's face was serious, but her tone was full of concern. I'm okay. However, Wuming's slightly pale face betrayed Wuming. You can't spoil Maeve all the time. Artoria began to educate Wuming. Although Artoria and Jean also had sex with Wuming, they were not the kind of people who would get addicted to it. They would only do it with Wuming when they were deeply in love, but they were usually like an old married couple. However, Maeve was different. Maeve was born with a perfect body like that of a goddess. It could be said that she was born with the ability to seduce men. And Maeve also acted according to the desire brought by this ability. Otherwise, Maeve's amorous behavior wouldn't be recorded in the historical stories. In addition, the Maeve that Wuming knew had always been pure. After having sex with Wuming, it was as if the desire that had been suppressed for a lifetime had been released. That was why she kept pestering Wuming. This time, it was quite impressive. Artoria didn't think that doing such things was evil, but there were limits. Just like last night, Maeve's screams were so loud that she and Jean couldn't sleep well. Fortunately, when they were brought to Wuming's side by the restraining force, their bodies were still at the level of heroic spirits. Otherwise, the dark circles under their eyes would be hanging on their faces. I know. I'll be careful in the future. It was impossible for Wuming not to be careful. If they did it every day, even Wuming wouldn't be able to take it. It was just like when the dust of a dead world entered the root. If the root's power couldn't supply it, the root would be burdened and forced to supply it. Over time, problems would arise. Knowing this, Wuming wouldn't let Maeve do as she pleased anymore. However, indulging like this from time to time was indeed very satisfying. "Isn't Jean with you?" Wuming asked Artoria about Jean. "She went to buy some supplements for you," Artoria replied calmly. Although Wuming didn't need them, as expected, compared to Artoria and Maeve, Jean was more suitable to be a wife. After all, she was a village girl. "By the way, when do you plan to bring Guinevere over?" Artoria's question surprised Wuming. Then, Wuming coughed and straightened his face. "I still have to send Mayu to school. Let's call it a day. I don't need any supplements." After that, Wuming ran away as if he was escaping. Artoria shook her head helplessly. She knew that Wuming was hiding something, but more than that, it was because Wuming found it hard to accept Artoria and Guinevere's identities. After all, the three of them were a twisted love triangle. Although it was pretentious, Artoria believed that Wuming would arrange everything in the end. Now, he just needed some time. Chapter 1061. Artoria was right. Wuming really needed time right now. When he thought about how many things he had to deal with, Wuming would rather fight another 300 rounds with Gydia. But that was all talk. He couldn't run away from what he had to face. After sending Mayu to school, Wuming and Collis arrived at the root of everything. The golden portal closed, and Wuming and Collis, who had just exited the portal, were now standing on the platform of the root of everything. The original portal was purplish-black, but it was still too dark, so Wuming modified it in the root of everything. Not only did it change the color, but its ability was also greatly enhanced. Otherwise, Wuming wouldn't have been able to use the portal to directly travel from Mayo's world to the root of everything. At the center of the platform where Collis and Wuming stood, Wuming's backup machine had already disappeared. Without a doubt, the backup machine had gone to save the world. Wuming waved his hand, and several high-tech screens appeared in front of Wuming and Collis. This was the result of Wuming using the authority of the root of everything. Wuming could directly see the scenes of other worlds, be it the past or the present. What was displayed on the screens was the live broadcast and recording of the backup machine saving the world. On the screens, various worlds were on the verge of destruction. In the next second, a giant white dragon descended from the sky, instantly found the source of the destruction, and stopped it. The survivors of those worlds were all deeply grateful to the giant white dragon. Although there were very few of them, there were still some who held resentment and hatred towards the white dragon for saving the world. Without a doubt, those people were not the masterminds behind the destruction of the world, but they probably had something to do with it. After that, the white dragon automatically retrieved information about that world, understood the cause, and used the root of everything to destroy those who were truly responsible for the destruction of the world and refused to change their ways. Even if they had abilities like substitutes or resurrections, they were useless in front of the root of everything. Wuming's backup machine tirelessly went to each world that was about to be destroyed one after another to save them. Looks like the backup machine can also take on my mission. However, there were worlds that had been saved, and there were also worlds that had not been saved. Wuming waved his hand again, and the screens in front of him changed instantly. The next thing that appeared on the screen was no longer a white dragon. Not only that, but the worlds on the screen were also on the verge of collapsing. A few seconds later, they completely shattered. Be it people or objects, they were all annihilated. As for the world itself, it would turn into an invisible speck of dust that wandered between worlds, eventually being sucked into the origin and becoming a speck of origin black soil. That's not a good idea. Wuming frowned. It was clear that while the origin dragon could quickly save worlds, there were many worlds that could not wait for that world to arrive. After all, there was no telling how many times the origin had reincarnated, how big the world was, or how many worlds there were. Coupled with the fact that the world was being destroyed faster and faster, Wuming's backup machine alone would not be able to save them in time. In order for Wuming's plan to become God to proceed, he had to ensure that the world would not be destroyed again. Otherwise, they would be like a pool of water that was being filled with water at the same time. Wuming raised his hand and began to connect with the origin. An invisible thread connected to Wuming's body. Wuming wanted to temporarily stop the origin's abilities to create worlds, recycle dust, and produce origin power. Wuming wanted the origin to control the time of all worlds. Controlling a few dozen, or even a few hundred worlds could be done easily by borrowing the origin's power. However, if he wanted to control the time of all worlds that were about to be destroyed, the origin would need to stop everything else and fully focus on this aspect. By temporarily stopping or slowing down the flow of time of the worlds that were about to be destroyed, there would be enough time to save those worlds. However, there was no telling when Wuming's backup machine alone would be able to save all the worlds that were about to be destroyed. As for having Wuming save all the worlds that were about to be destroyed while their time was being controlled, that was even more impossible. After all, Wuming still had to accompany Mayu, and there were a lot of things that he needed to take care of, so how could he save so many worlds that were about to be destroyed at once? And so, Wuming made a decision. I need to find someone to help. As for who to find, it was naturally the people that Wuming was familiar with in the worlds that he had experienced. However, they all had their own lives, and not many of them would be able to fully devote themselves to saving a world. And so, Wuming made another decision. He wanted to create a system. That's right, a system that gave the host a mission. He did as he said. And so, Wuming used the power of the Prime Origin to create the system. Because it was a drop in the ocean compared to the time needed to control all the worlds, creating this system did not burden the Prime Origin much. Similarly, it did not take much time and was quickly completed. Wuming held a ball of light that was emitting a faint white light in one hand with a satisfied look on his face. By the way, because it was a system, it did not have a fixed shape or size, and what Wuming was holding was the concept of a system. Wuming had set up a mission cycle in the system, which would issue missions at fixed times, and the missions were naturally to save the world. According to the difficulty and degree of destruction of each world, the missions would be categorized into different types, and those who fit the criteria would be given the corresponding missions. Because this system was connected to the Prime Origin would personally select the worlds and issue missions, so there was no need to worry about any issues. Normally, when a mission was issued, the default option would be accept the mission, but there were also options to postpone the mission or reject the mission. After all, the real reason why Wuming had set up this system was to allow Wuming's acquaintances to save the world without affecting their own lives. Completing a mission would grant a required reward, and the reward could be selected by the host. For example, a reward that would increase one's personal strength, or a reward that would strengthen one's group. And these rewards would be directly replicated by the Prime Origin from each world where such rewards existed, so there was no need to worry about affecting other worlds. Moreover, because it was for acquaintances, there would be no failure penalty even if the reject the mission was chosen, and the rejected mission would not be delayed but transferred to someone else. However, if the postpone the mission option was chosen, the reward would definitely be reduced. Postpone the mission meant that the host would temporarily accept the mission and not do it immediately. And if the host did not accept the mission but did not do it immediately, the reward would naturally be reduced. Of course, if there was enough time, the host could also request the system to accept more missions. In any case, this was a rather good system from all aspects. Master, do you want to give it a name? Kala suggested. A name. After thinking for a second or two, Wuming gave an answer. Just call it system. Chapter 1062. Collis didn't say anything about this. After all, she already knew that her master was terrible at naming things. She was just looking forward to it. Now, let the Great Origin send this system to a designated existence. Then, with that existence as the unit, it can be spread to the surroundings. The system was a concept. Therefore, Wuming would split it into several parts and send it to a certain existence in the world that Wuming had experienced. Then, that existence would spread it to other people designated by Wuming. Wuming lightly tossed the system in his hand, and the ball of light instantly disappeared. The system had been sent by the Great Origin to a designated person in the world designated by Wuming. In Mayo's world, Artoria, Jean, and Maeve all received the system. Immediately, the three of them gathered together. My dear needs me. Of course, I'll help him. Maeve smiled sweetly. She didn't want to be treated like a vase by Wuming. Fortunately, Wuming didn't do that. He still chose to let her help. This isn't just helping Wuming. It's also saving other worlds. Artoria was King Arthur, after all. She had a strong sense of justice. I'll help as much as I can. Although Jean didn't have much confidence, when it came to saving other worlds, she would definitely not hesitate, just like Artoria. After all, this was indeed helping Wuming. Although Enkidu also received the system, her main task was to look after Tiamat. As for Mayu, Ilya, and the others, although they weren't weak, Wuming didn't give them the system. Elementary school students should just obediently go to school. Great Underground Tomb of Nazalik. In the office, the Guardian Supervisor Yair Bade sat on the high-class sofa that belonged to Wuming's office. He had a serious expression as he went through documents. That is, if you ignore the fact that Yair Bades but was constantly moving against the sofa. If Demiurgos were here, he would definitely ask Yair Bade what he was doing. Then, Yair Bade would reply with an infatuated look on his face that he was trying to taint Wuming's aura. Right at this moment, Yair Bade froze as if he had just received something. Knock knock, there was a knock on the door, and Demiurgos walked in. Seeing the stunned Yair Bade, Demiurgos was puzzled. Demiurgos walked to the desk and put down the document in his hand. What's wrong, Yair Bade? Yair Bade, who had regained his senses after hearing Demiurgos' words, had a serious expression on his face. Sir Wuming sent a message. When it came to Wuming, Demiurgos became serious. Demiurgos, Lord Wuming is going to become a god in another world. I see, so that's why Lord Wuming left this world. Then, we will naturally get what Lord Wuming wants. Both Yair Bade and Demiurgos had a joyful expression. As expected of the Supreme Honorable, even his goal was so great. The two began to imagine, according to the Supreme Honorable's decree, we need to implant the system that Lord Wuming passed to me into everyone in the great underground tomb of Nazalik to help Lord Wuming save the worlds that are about to be destroyed. After all, if those worlds are destroyed, Lord Wuming's goal will not be achieved. Hearing this, Demiurgos pushed up his glasses. Indeed, and we can even win people's hearts through rescue. As expected of Lord Wuming. Neither of them cared about why other worlds were involved. After all, they had come to another world in the great underground tomb of Nazalik. There was nothing wrong with Wuming going to another world. Then, Yair Bade stretched out her hand, and a ball of light appeared in her hand. You can implant this system through contact. Lord Wuming has already put the specific method of use in the system. Arrange it as soon as possible. As she spoke, Yair Bade touched Demiurgos with the ball of light. In the next second, Demiurgos had a thought, and the same ball of light appeared in his hand. So that's how it is. As expected of Lord Wuming, to be able to create such a powerful tool. Then, Demiurgos bowed slightly. Then, I'll take my leave. I'll get everyone in the great underground tomb of Nazalik to implant it as soon as possible. Demiurgos left the room, leaving Yair Bate alone in the room with a look of excitement. Lord Wuming, I will definitely make you a god in another world. The same thing happened in another world. In the world of the god slayers, Athena, Lancelot, and Guinevere, who were living on a small island in the Pacific Ocean, received the system at the same time. My lord. Lancelot, who was dressed like an older sister, looked very excited. It's Lord Villo. Guinevere, who looked like a young girl, was even more excited. Interesting. Athena, on the other hand, seemed to be very interested in this system. My lord needs us. Lancelot immediately dressed up, as if he was about to go save the world. Wait. Wait, uncle, don't be in such a hurry, Guinevere quickly said. Lancelot was confused. With just the three of us, I'm afraid we can't help much. This system has a spreading function, and there's also a list of people who can be trusted. Why don't we leave one person to spread the word? Athena instantly understood Guinevere's meaning. That's right, I think so too. This way, we can help Lord Villo more efficiently. If that's the case, let my beloved daughter stay. With my lord's deterrence, even without me, no one would dare to attack you, Lancelot suggested. Ha! That's right. Even if you become his subordinate god, you won't have much combat power. At most, you can protect yourself. If that's the case, you should stay. Then, Lancelot and Athena instantly disappeared. They accepted the system's mission and went to save the other worlds. Guinevere, who was left alone, was in a state of sorrow. Why did this happen? I wanted to see if I could see Lord Villo. In the game world, in the human kingdom of Elgia, the residence of the queen. Rick, who had installed a mechanical arm on the broken arm, hurriedly ran in from outside. Rick had matured a lot, but he was not as haggard as before. Chloe, I have news of Lord Villo. Rick's sister, Chloe, who was not dressed very elegantly, walked out in surprise. Compared to the cheerful and lively Chloe before, Chloe was now more dignified. However, Chloe did not change when it came to her brother. The god who disguised himself as a human to help you. Didn't you say he went to the other worlds? After Wuming left, Rick did not hide it and told his sister about Wuming's identity, who was the current queen of the human kingdom. After Teto became the only god, Chloe, with the support of Rick and many other humans, established the human kingdom of Elgia and became the queen. Teto repaired the World Cup, so the living conditions of the humans were not bad. More and more humans from small tribes joined Elgia, and Elgia became more and more prosperous. Let's not talk so much. Take a look at this first. Rick instantly held Chloe's hand. Chloe was stunned as if she was electrocuted. This system is very suitable for the development of us humans. After understanding that system that had been transferred from Rick to Crony expressed her thoughts. I think so too, but I'm still considering whether to give this to other races. Although the world was at peace, the conflicts between the various races could not be resolved so easily. The races that needed to cooperate were willing to put aside their hatred, but the forest elves and goblins were still enemies, not to mention the other races. Let's do it secretly in our country first. Our only god is Teto, after all. If we spread the outer god's things, I'm afraid the only god will be unhappy. Chloe, who had been the queen for a while, immediately made a decision. Of course, the system has stated that we can spread it directly to the Jikai race. I'll leave this task to you, Rick. Remember to explain it to Zio properly. I know, I'll contact the Jikai race. Rick looked helpless. Then, Chloe showed a pained expression. As the ambassador, you're the only one who has good contact with the Jikai race. However, the Jikai race did have some problems with their brains recently, so you should be careful. Although Rick had given up the throne to his sister, he had become a diplomat of the kingdom. Rick had always been working hard for the country. Moreover, Rick's mechanical arm was obtained through diplomatic contact with the Jikai race. Due to Zio, the Jikai race was gradually awakening their individual emotions, but machines were still machines, and no one could guarantee when they would have problems. The Jikai race has already unilaterally submitted to the Villo, just like the Skywing race. I believe that if it's something from the Villo, they would definitely accept it. Rick looked confident. If that's the case, let's contact the Skywing race at the same time. A child's voice rang out in the hall where only Chloe and Rick were present. The only god. Teto. When did you get here? Both Chloe and Rick instantly knew who the owner of the voice was. It was the god of games, Tut. As for why Rick acted like he was familiar with Teto and even dared to be so impudent, it was because Teto would come looking for Rick to play that unfinished game of chess, and the game was still ongoing. Moreover, Teto was born from Rick's thoughts, and the two of them could be considered close friends, which was why Rick was so casual. I'm a Villo after all, so I'll allow him to interfere with this world as much as possible. Just do it. If Wuming hadn't given the celestial cup to Teto, Teto wouldn't have become the only god. In a sense, Wuming could be considered the father of this world's only god. After Teto's voice disappeared, Chloe and Rick looked at each other and nodded. They then split up and began to spread the system. Above the clouds of the kingdom of Elgia, Teto was holding a white ball of light with a smile on his face. The system only gave it to the humans. Looks like you want the Skywing and Jikai races to ally with the humans. As expected of you. In the next second, Teto, who had loaded the system, disappeared. Such a fun game, system, naturally had to be tried out by him, the only god. Chapter 1063. Let's go back, Matthew. Gadotsi looked particularly worried. It's okay, senpai. My body was originally used for experiments. I'm already very satisfied to be able to live until now, meet senpai, and experience so much. Before Matthew finished speaking, he fell into a coma. Matthew. Gadotsi didn't know where she got the strength from, but she directly carried Matthew and ran back to Chaldea. The next second after Gadotsi and Matthew's figures disappeared, a golden ripple appeared, and Wuming walked out of the portal. Looking at the two people in the distance, Wuming was quite glad. He was glad that he came in person this time. Casey Perrick. Wuming whispered softly, and a snow-white squirrel-like animal came out of the snow. It was Fufu. In fact, during this period, Fufu had been following Matthew, but Matthew couldn't find it most of the time. Just like this time, Fufu was hiding in the snow. By the way, Fufu was not as afraid of Wuming as before this time. Instead, it walked to Wuming and sat down. You want to save Matthew, right? Wuming said. Fufu didn't speak, nor did it shout. It just nodded gently. Then do it. You've been in Chaldea for so long, it's time to repay Matthew's kindness. Fufu was quite puzzled. Could it be that Wuming called it out just to say this? I originally wanted to adjust Matthew's body myself, but I accidentally found you. I don't like people who don't repay kindness, so I'm going to use your ability as a beast to adjust Matthew's body. It turned out that Fufu wanted to use the energy accumulated during the time in Chaldea. Fufu agreed. Wuming waved his hand and a golden teleportation gate opened up. A mass of golden essence flew out from it. The essence instantly fused into Fufu's body. In the next second, Fufu's body began to change. Fo's head, body, and limbs swelled up as if they had grown tumors. However, as if he didn't want to turn into a beast, Fufu forcibly suppressed it. The tumor-like swelling all came to Fufu's tail. In the end, Fufu's body did not change at all. Only his tail became incomparably huge, like a burning seven-colored flame, filling the sky. Fufu glanced at Wuming, then turned around abruptly and charged towards Chaldea. Watching Fufu enter Chaldea, Wuming did not move, because he was waiting for someone. However, Wuming knew that that person would not come for a while, so he chose to walk around and enjoy the snowy scenery. Wuming did not give the system to anyone in Chaldea. After all, other than the heroic spirits, only Olga Marie, who was about to master the third law, was powerful. Matthew, Gadotsi, Roman, and the less than 20 Chaldea employees who survived did not have much combat power. Moreover, they did not need to become powerful, especially Gadotsi, Matthew, and Roman. They did not desire to become powerful. They were satisfied with being ordinary people. Wuming walked while daydreaming. About half an hour later, a man in a white coat came from Chaldea. It was Roman Ackerman. As soon as they met, Wuming asked about Matthew. "How is Matthew? Is his body okay now?" The reason why Roman came out late was naturally to check on Matthew's physical condition after being transformed by Fufu's power. Matthew's injuries are completely healed, and his cells are no longer dying. He can be said to be the same as a normal person, and his physical fitness is far better than that of an ordinary person. Roman's face was filled with joy from the bottom of his heart, and at the same time, he was relieved. After Roman asked Wuming to bypass Gidia, he gave the 10th ring of King Solomon to Wuming. As a price, Roman completely bid farewell to his identity as King Solomon. However, after that, Matthew's body began to deteriorate, which made Roman blame himself. If he still had the ring, he would have used all of King Solomon's power to save Matthew. After all, his identity had been exposed. The remaining less than 20 people in Chaldea knew Roman's true identity, so Roman did not need to hide it. However, Roman gave the 10th ring to Wuming. But now, the fourth beast, who had been hiding in Chaldea, had transformed Matthew's body at the cost of sacrificing his intelligence. Matthew would no longer be affected by the after-effects of human experimentation. Moreover, they had defeated the fourth beast in disguise. This was a good thing for all mankind. "It seems that you really like being a human, Solomon," Wuming said, turning to look at the snow. "Just call me Roman. Indeed, I like being an ordinary person. If it weren't for the sake of humanity, I wouldn't have become a doctor and entered Chaldea." Roman and Wuming stood side by side, looking into the distance. "Congratulations, your wish has been completely fulfilled," Wuming said half-jokingly. After all, Roman had completely lost the ability of King Solomon, and he was already an ordinary person. "If it's possible, I really want to quit my job in Chaldea and be a real ordinary person. I want to enjoy my life, work my life, be happy my life, and worry my life." But he could not. Chaldea was now waiting to be done. Even if it was purely for Matthew, Roman had to stay. In order to prevent human experimentation like Matthew from appearing in Chaldea again, Roman had to stay and supervise Chaldea. "I'm going to let Gidia work for me," Wuming stated his intention. "Work?" Roman was stunned. "It has destroyed many worlds. After those worlds have been reconstructed by me, I'm going to let it protect those worlds." I see. Even Roman found it slightly difficult to accept the topic of destroying and reconstructing worlds. "Also, I'm going to let Gidia inherit your power and save those worlds that are about to perish for me first." Wuming was going to let Gidia implant the system to save the world. However, the system given to Gidia was dedicated to monitoring Gidia. There would be no reward, and there would be no rejection of missions. Everything was mandatory. This was the proverb, you can avoid death, but you can't escape punishment. Although Gidia was spared, punishment was inevitable. Let it go. I believe that it will be willing to do so now. After experiencing the threat of death, Roman thought that Gydia would reflect on it. After all, it was a tactic created by Roman. Roman did not think that Gydia would be pulled down. That's it then. I'll go first. After all, Wuming still had a lot of things to do. Don't you want to see the director? Roman suddenly said. Wuming stopped, turned around, and glanced at Roman. She has Parmelia with her. I don't need to. I'll come and see her when she has fully mastered the third method. Opening the golden ripple, Wuming did not stop and walked straight in. After the portal closed, Roman raised his arm. He had a communication device like Godotzi's on his arm. Director, he's gone. Chapter 1064. Wuming returned to the route, and Collis was waiting for Wuming on the central platform of the route. As long as Wuming left, Collis would replace Wuming as the temporary administrator. Master, I've confirmed all the people you've been paying special attention to. They've all been implanted with systems, so you don't have to worry about letting them meet for now. Wuming felt a bit awkward at Collis's honest words. Wuming coughed to hide his awkwardness. Ahem, let's begin the next part of the plan. The next part of the plan was Wuming's plan to become a god. He had to restrict the highly developed worlds and control them as a god, so that they wouldn't self-destruct because they wanted to explore higher levels of development. My contract, my dependence, I am the place where the tributaries converge. Bind with me, heed my call, obey my command, appear. As Wuming chanted the words of the spirit, nothing happened. Or rather, nothing happened to the root. Meanwhile, in each of the highly developed worlds, a silhouette appeared. It was a silent silhouette. Now, Wuming's essence and abilities had transcended from before, reaching an unprecedented and indescribable height. The price was that Wuming's eyes couldn't be changed back to their original color, and could only maintain their golden color and fiery red pupils. The 12 clones had completely broken free from the shackles of the spirit, and could activate their abilities with just a thought. Chanting the spirit was just a habit of Wuming's. Not only that, but all of Wuming's abilities had been strengthened like never before. The dependence of the 12 clones could create countless clones with strength comparable to the main body. Wuming wanted to use these clones to enter the highly developed world selected by the root to restrict these worlds and prevent them from dying. Wuming's original plan was to wait until all the worlds that were about to be destroyed were saved before activating it. However, in the end, Wuming still chose to work on both fronts. Restricting highly developed worlds from heading towards destruction, saving worlds that were about to be destroyed from destruction, stopping all functions of the root, and focusing all efforts on controlling time in all worlds. That way, the world would no longer be destroyed, and the world dust would not enter the root and become the root's black soil. Wuming's series of actions would no longer lead to the destruction of worlds. As long as he restricted the highly developed worlds and saved the worlds that were about to be destroyed, everything would return to the right track. The Great Origin would no longer accelerate its reincarnation due to its burdens, and the world would no longer be destroyed. The death of a world would only be a natural death because it had reached its end. In short, all that was left now was only a matter of time. After some calculations, Master only needs to send Mayu-sama to school for another 3 months, and everything will be realized. With Collis's words, Wuming was relieved. Everything is finally settled. Wuming lay down on the root's platform and rested. Thinking back to the time when the old man who took him in had passed away, when he obtained his own scale and headed to a mysterious world to begin this memorable journey, Wuming was filled with endless emotions. Wuming got to know quite a few people and came into contact with quite a few things along the way. But in the end, he still managed to return home and eliminate the trouble brought by the origin, black soil, as well as alter the origin, and prevent the destruction of a large number of worlds. This is much more interesting than before. The before Wuming was referring to the root dragon before this reincarnation. Back then, the root dragon was like a machine that constantly carried out its mission to protect the world. Although it had visited many worlds and seen many things, it was still rather boring. After Wuming received these memories from the root, he immediately used some means to extract them and seal them away. The reason could be summed up in one word: boring. Moreover, Wuming felt that it was enough to have the memories of when he was Wuming. If he received those memories, Wuming might not be himself anymore. Or rather, it was very likely that it would revert back to being the tireless, brainless, and machine-like origin dragon that only knew how to save the world. At that thought, Wuming felt that it was great that he could become Wuming from the root dragon. At that moment, Collis suddenly spoke, interrupting Wuming's thoughts. Master, according to the memo, you have yet to resolve the issue of Irburoi, the Platinum Dragon King, and the nameless spellbook. At Collis's words, Wuming abruptly jumped up from the platform. I would have forgotten if you didn't mention it. Wuming swiped his hand across the void, and a virtual screen appeared. This was the current world of the underground tomb. Irburoi was a vampire, after all, and Wuming was using the root to search for the earliest timeline of Irburoi's era. Wuming decided to resolve Irburoi's issue first. So it's 200 years ago. Wuming found it. Just adjust the timeline to 300 years ago. I'll go ahead and see what's going on. She had traveled through the timeline before Irburoi was born and then hid in the dark. Wuming could not find the reason for his distrust. However, Wuming's mind suddenly lit up. He paused for a moment as if he understood something. Could it be that I actually went to that era and came into contact with that dragon while hiding in the dark? As for what Irburoi said about Wuming being her benefactor, perhaps Wuming had gone to that world and accidentally exposed his past to Irburoi. It seemed that he had to find another way. If that's the case, I won't go, right? I don't believe that it's because of me if I don't go. However, in the next second after Wuming said that, several figures somehow appeared on the platform of the route. Maeve, Tiamat, Athena, the young version of Guinevere, the young version of Guinevere, Lancelot, Pest, Letitia, and Shiobi. These young girls of all shapes and sizes. At first, they did not know what to do. However, they quickly reacted. Because Wuming was here. However, while they reacted, Wuming did not. Darling. Maeve jumped into Wuming's arms. Child. Child. Tiamat hugged Wuming from behind. Lord Villo. The young version of Guinevere and the young version of Guinevere hugged Wuming from both sides. Athena stood aside and watched the show. She stopped Lancelot, who wanted to help the monarch. Letitia comforted Pest, who did not get the chance. Shiobi, on the other hand, was more easily satisfied. She only needed to see Wuming, the person who changed her and made her develop feelings for him, and that was enough. Collis. What's going on? Wuming was extremely flustered. Master, they are all existences with systems implanted in them. After they completed a mission to save the world, the reward they chose was to meet you. Therefore, the root in charge of giving out rewards directly gave them the rewards they wanted. By the way, Master, Lady Irburoi and Lady Mayu have also come into contact with systems for some reason. Wuming could not help but look at Maeve. He felt that it was Maeve's doing. Maeve, on the other hand, chuckled and admitted it. Also, your female guards in the Godslayer world have also been implanted with systems. Collis emphasized the word female. Wuming looked at the young version of Guinevere. The young version of Guinevere chuckled and admitted it. The young version of Guinevere is the reward that Artoria chose. Wuming's eyes started to lose focus. At that moment, Enkidu broke through space and walked out. I'm sorry, Lord Wuming. I accidentally let Mother come into contact with systems. Now, looking at the large number of young girls surrounding Wuming, Enkidu could not continue. As the saying goes, raising a cow is the same as raising 2 cows. It seems that one more Tiamat would not be a problem. Call us, let's go. With a whoosh, Wuming disappeared. He went to 300 years ago, the era before Ibirui was born. Wuming now knew why he left his mark in that world hundreds of years ago. It was because it was unavoidable. What was worth celebrating was that the world crisis had basically been resolved, and Wuming's ultimate goal had been achieved. However, after Wuming returned from that world, he had to face how he provoked these young girls. They lived in peace. This was comparable to the destruction of the world. This might be the end of one thing, the beginning of another. End. Chapter 1065. In the Hakata world, because of Wuming's achievement in defeating absolute evil, No Name was given the title of regional ruler by White Yiksha. Coupled with the recapture of the flag, the community was able to develop rapidly, but No Name still didn't have a name. Because it was taken away by the Demon King, if they wanted to get back the title, they had to obtain the contract to obtain the name of No Name. But this was extremely difficult. If it wasn't for someone intentionally releasing Az Dakaha, who knew when they would be able to find the flag of No Name. And there were also the members of No Name that were taken away by the Demon King. They had to all be found, which wasn't an easy task. But if it was according to 16 Knights' words, that would be, "This is interesting, isn't it?" In the No Name conference room, Ren, who had just finished analyzing the current flaws of No Name, looked at the excited 16 Knights who stood up and sighed helplessly, but didn't say anything. What's interesting about it? 16 Knights, San's brain is always wired differently from others. Black Rabbit couldn't help but complain. But Jiu Yuao stood on 16 Knights' side. 16 Knights is right. This is more challenging for this lady. Haruai Hiroyuki, who was holding the three-furred cat, also nodded. Interesting. What's interesting about it? Miss Hiroyuki and Miss Hiroyuki are obviously just playing around. Black Rabbit was so angry that his ears jumped. Don't say that, Black Rabbit. 16 Knights smiled wantonly and looked at Black Rabbit. Villo, that guy defeated absolute evil in the final trial by himself. How can this uncle be left behind? We're not delicate flowers that need to hide behind him. If this kind of thing is always left to the Villo, wouldn't we lose face? Jiu Yuao added. So, we have to finish what even the Villo couldn't. Haruai Hiroyuki's eyes became determined. Letitia, who was sitting on the side, couldn't help but smile. She could see that these 3 problem children did want to be in the limelight, but more importantly, they also wanted to take on the responsibility of the community and didn't want to let Wuming bear everything alone. However, they were still not strong enough. After all, the reason why Wuming didn't seek help from No Name when Az Dakaha was released was because they were too weak. When Wuming had faced Az Dakaha, who had the origin black soil, he didn't even dare to say that he had a 100% chance of winning, so how could he involve others? Otherwise, Wuming wouldn't have used himself as bait to entangle Az Dakaha and prevent him from wreaking havoc. Otherwise, with Az Dakaha's strength at that time, the lower levels of the box court would have been wiped out, and it would be hard to say if all the members of No Name would have survived. Then you'll have to hurry up and become stronger. Letitia smiled. At this moment, a light spot appeared above the conference room table. The light spot suddenly split into several parts and merged into everyone's body at a speed that no one could react to. 16 Knights closed her eyes and sensed the information from the light that entered her body. A few seconds later, she suddenly opened her eyes. I was still left behind by that guy. However, 16 Nights wasn't dispirited because of this. Instead, her smile was exceptionally bright. However, this is also a way to become stronger. Watch me use this Villos thing to catch up to him. When the time comes, he'll cry. The thing that just entered the bodies of No Name was the system that Wuming created. And you can also become a savior. Jo Yuasuka's eyes were shining as if she was very interested in saving the world. There are also rewards that can be obtained. Hiroi Hiroyuki pointed out the main point. This was also the way to become stronger that 16 Nights had mentioned. And you can also choose a group reward. That's great, young Master Ren. This way, our community can develop even faster. How did Mr. Villo create such a powerful gift? Black Rabbit's face was filled with joy. This reward is really. Now even finding the former members of the community and our No Name's previous names will be more convenient. Mr. Villo has really helped us a lot. Ren's face also showed an uncontrollable smile. As expected of my master. Letitia seemed to be used to her master being able to do surprising things. However, Letitia noticed that Pest, who didn't have much right to speak and didn't speak much, was now frozen in place as if he was possessed. What's wrong, Pest? Letitia curiously walked to Pest's side. Ah. I'm fine. Pest was shocked and immediately turned his back on Letitia. However, Pest didn't look like he was fine no matter how she looked at him. I'll go out first. Pest finished speaking and ran out without looking back. After that, Letitia found a few drops of tears on Pest's seat. Pest, who ran out, couldn't stop his tears from flowing. This was because in the system that Wuming gave her, there was a message from Wuming. I've already investigated. The sun entering the Little Ice Age caused the Black Death to break out. It was actually to suppress a human's final trial. As long as your strength is enough, I will definitely help you solve the human's final trial. This way, White Yiksha will have no reason to let the sun enter the Little Ice Age, and the history of the Black Death will also be changed. Moreover, this is the box court, so you don't have to worry about disappearing. Maybe at that time, I won't even have to do anything. You and your No Name companions can kill that human's final trial. So, whether it's summoning Wes and Latine or changing the birth of the Black Death, I want you to do it yourself. Through this gift that I'm giving you, work hard to become stronger, my little maid. Recalling these words, Pest's tears began to fall faster and faster, and so did his footsteps. Finally, after reaching his room, Pest couldn't hold it in anymore and burst into tears. Wah! Letitia, who was standing outside Pest's door with her back against the wall, smiled faintly and said the same words as before. As expected of you, my master. The Axmoon world was located inside Chaldea, which was located on an iceberg in the center of the South Pole. Because of Wuming and Zelik, Chaldea managed to survive. The dozens of masters who were kept in the freezer also woke up and were sent to the hospital for treatment. Now, everyone knew that Chaldea wasn't to be trifled with. Only a few rascals dared to target Chaldea. However, even Olga Marie's Animosphia family would be able to take care of these rascals. After Olga Marie completely learned the third spell, Chaldea might become another great influence in the magician world. It also seemed to reflect Chaldea's beautiful future. During this time, the sky in Chaldea often cleared up, but this wasn't a bad thing. Gadotzi and Matthew would come out for a walk from time to time. Although it was a little cold, this peace couldn't be exchanged. Today, the two were still walking outside. By the way, Matthew, do you know that Chaldea is in the South Pole? Gadotzi suddenly asked. Matthew's little head couldn't help but tilt. The South Pole? No, Senior, I'm not very sure. After all, I haven't been out much. After all, Matthew was the product of Chaldea's human experiments. Naturally, he didn't know. Is that so? Gadotsi probably also thought of this, and felt a little lonely. Today, I learned from the doctor that Chaldea is on an iceberg in the center of the South Pole. I thought it was on the Himalayas. After all, it was the highest mountain in the world. Normal people would generally think so. Even if they didn't think so, they wouldn't have thought that Chaldea was on the snow mountain in the South Pole. I didn't think about this problem. Matthew looked up at the sky and said quietly, "Actually, I'm satisfied as long as I can see the blue sky." Looking at Matthew like this, Gadotsi felt particularly distressed. At this time, Matthew suddenly coughed. "Cough, cough, Matthew." Gadotsi immediately supported Matthew, who almost fell. A trace of blood emerged from Matthew's palm that was covering his mouth. Matthew's body had reached its limit. As a test subject of the heroic spirit possession experiment, it was a miracle that Matthew could live until now. And accompanied Gadotsi through 7 singularities. Even with the existence of Galahad's spiritual base, Matthew's body was full of holes. In other words, Matthew didn't have long to live. You're tuning into the LoveLore Library YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.